We have a very special guest today. Let me introduce Nathan Kennedy, aka New Money Nate.
Pleasure to be here.
Welcome to the show, buddy.
Pleasure. I'm looking forward to it, man. I don't know what the hell we're about to do and get into, but I'm excited.
So I got to start by saying you are the first guy or girl who is on the cast who is not a parent.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, shit my dad taught me, but we have a non-dad here today because it's all about perspective. It's all about different angles. So that's a cool fun fact to kick things off. And then for some of you who might not have come across some of Nate's content, Nate's a big fucking deal. He's a big fucking deal. Okay. We have a little segment to open this up where we go to our friends at ChatGPT.
Okay.
And we type in our friends, our guests, and we see what ChatGPT
We see how big of a deal they are.
Okay.
Big fucking deal. I'll tell you, this is the first time I've put somebody into ChatGPT and it came back with more than I wanted to say on the podcast. So,
can you cut that down?
yeah, that's right. So I'm going to read it. And you tell me how ChatGPT did.
All right.
All right. So it says, Nathan Kennedy is a dynamic personal finance content creator and educator who has made significant strides in financial literacy, particularly among young adults. So far, so good.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
It says, with a community exceeding over 1 million followers across platforms like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Nathan has become a trusted voice in personal finance education.
Oh, wow. That came from ChatGPT?
That came from
I think
ChatGPT.
that came right from your LinkedIn page.
yeah, probably.
You fucking wrote that, didn't you?
It scraped my LinkedIn. Yeah, there you go.
But that's almost too soft of a flex because I know, because I went on, you are about to cross 1 million followers just on TikTok.
On TikTok, yeah.
You're like,
we'll see. I appreciate that. We'll see what happens with that. There's a lot of news about TikTok right now. So hopefully it's not in, for nothing. But yeah, no, almost there.
That's incredible, dude.
Yeah.
So it goes on to say, and I won't, again, ChatGPT clearly had a bit of a man crush on you, so we'll compress it down a little bit. But it says you began your journey in 2019, launching the New Money with Nathan Kennedy podcast to demystify personal finance topics for a younger audience. His engaging style and relatable content has resonated with many, leading to a substantial following.
Yeah, I mean, keep going, man.
Keep going. Yeah, that's right. Goes on to say he's got really big arms, and so that's the overview, dude. So tell me about that. Let's go back to 2019. How did you get into all this?
Yeah, man. You know what? So I had done actually a sports podcast a few years prior with some buddies. We never took it seriously, but it was really early. I mean, like even in 2017, I remember being like, podcasting is so like crowded. It's like, dude, it hasn't even scratched the surface. It still hasn't even scratched the surface, right? So we started playing around with that, and it was a fun thing, and I really liked it, but I could tell the guys didn't really. It was just a fun thing. I was like, man, let's take this seriously, whatever. And eventually I felt like I wanted to do my own thing. So I was like, okay, like I'm super into money. Like I'm, super into financial literacy, taught myself a lot of stuff in school because I wasn't good with money, but I knew the value of a dollar. So basically ended up starting my own pod, just like teaching different lessons, kind of similar to what you guys are trying to do with shit my dad taught me. Like, hey, like, here's how to budget, here's how to invest, here's how to manage your credit card, whatever. Just started putting out episodes in 2019 and would post on Instagram and all that kind of stuff. And then eventually the social medias pages themselves kind of took a life of their own because originally with podcasting, like you kind of need social platforms to promote it to get people to come and listen.
For sure.
Still the case now. Eventually the social platforms just kind of took a life of their own and I just focused on that. And then the show kind of whittled down. So that's kind of where we find ourselves today.
For people who haven't seen your content yet, talk to me about, let's say specifically the TikToks and Reels, and the shorts that you do. What's the style of that content and what do you do?
The best way to describe it, I wish I had a better word, but like they're just skits where it's just me sort of talking, playing both characters. I like that storytelling device because it's a way to kind of, engage people and get them interested and it's better and it's easier for me to craft a story and a thing through like conversation because that's like as old as time, like dialogue, movies, TV, whatever. It's all dialogue. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just be the dialogue. It was a popular style, and then I kind of took it and wanted to like make it better and better and more cinematographic and more real and things like that. And now, I take anything from money stuff to career stuff to business stories. Like these things would not really get out there if like to the audience that I'm sharing it to, if I wasn't doing it, this kind of style in this engaging way. And so, yeah, I love doing that because it's almost like a mini movie for folks, and it gets the point across without me, sitting in front of a camera and just telling you what to do. I don't think anybody's really going to listen to that. You kind of have to be a bit more creative or have some sort of angle, and like that's my angle. So that's what I do.
It's kind of cool seeing that, like, if you were having that conversation with somebody else, it's kind of a judgmental conversation because you have your own perspective of it, where you're arguing both sides of it, and it's the same person dressed as two characters.
Yeah.
So you see that somebody's actually like thought through this and thought both sides of this process, and like
Totally.
how to engage through that. So it's pretty awesome.
Totally. And I've noticed like people, it's a trend on these short form platforms where they'll take like clips from, Suits or HBO shows or whatever, and they'll just like appear. And I noticed that trend. So I figured, well, we could just recreate that ourselves and like do like a more a style more endemic to the platform. And so, yeah, like I love it. Like it's getting more and more fun over time. Like, Miles and I work on it all the time, and it's cool. It's starting to really pick up some steam there. So
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
One of the things GPT said in its ongoing Man Crush review was it said, Nate emphasizes the importance of investing in oneself, advocating for continuous learning and skill development as key drivers of financial success. Tell me about that.
I worked at Pepsi for a few years after school. So I was in the like leadership program, and I was like working, job, making good money. I think I was like, my last year I was making like, I don't know, 80, 90 grand, and I was like 23 or something like that. It was like pretty good money. But I was doing this podcast stuff on the side, and it started to make money too. And then it started to make a little bit more money, and then it started to make as much money, and then it started to make more money. And then I'm like, okay, I actually have to take this seriously, because I remember during like lockdown in 2020, like I remember thinking like, dude, I just wish I could do this. Obviously can't, because that's crazy, but like I wish I could just do this. This is the most fun thing in the world, right? And eventually, like I'm like, man, this could actually be a thing. So I remember I was saving up for like a rental property, and I had like, I don't know, like 40 or 50 grand saved up, and I was just gonna creatively find a way to buy a property in some, butt fuck nowhere town in Ontario or something, and just like, because that was the thing. It was real estate. I realized later that this might actually, this content stuff might be a bigger opportunity. And, I figured, hey, like if I'm going to take a bet, like I should take a bet now. So I gave myself like 3 months. I think it was April or May of 2021. And I said, I'm going to quit my job in 3 months. I'm going to tell my boss I'm leaving. I just have to get things in order, so, maybe move around some money, make a plan, figure out like financial plans. But I felt like well positioned. And if I still feel the same way in 3 months, like September 1, like I'm telling them I'm gone. And like, that's exactly what happened. And so I quit my job, went all in on this. And, every year has been better than the last. So, I think it was the right decision. And I don't ever look back and think it was I think back, I should have done it earlier type thing. So I'm a huge believer of that, because that's what I did. Now I also do advocate for people to do that on their own timing, right? Entrepreneurship isn't for everybody. And certainly, some folks would find the same fulfillment, if not more, working a corporate job. I got nothing against it. In fact, I'm like the one guy in my space being like, yeah, this, hustler entrepreneur stuff, man, like it's not for everybody, and that's okay. But it's unlimited potential. Like if you want to take that bet and you are inclined to that, and you have that in your blood, like you should give it a try, especially in your 20s. So I encourage people to do that, because like, who gives a shit, bro? Yeah. I could go back to Pepsi or Coke or wherever, like any company. I think I'd figure it out. If you have that like sort of self-belief, like I just felt like, man, what is this crazy opportunity that I'm giving up right now, versus like the inverse is like, what if I don't take that, bet? Like that's a way bigger risk I'm taking of not achieving, something much greater. So that's kind of how I looked at it. And that's why like I talk about that a lot in the content. Yeah.
I tell people all the time, you're only limited by your own desire to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not willing to push themselves and get out of the box, then there is no chance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if they're the type of person that's a procrastinator and, I'll get my house clean by the end of the month because, I've got people coming over. If they do the same thing with the rest of their life, then that's what's going to happen with their job opportunities, with their financial investing opportunities, with everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they just keep putting it off. So
yeah,
kudos to you for trying to coach people on not being that person.
Yeah, man. I just, it's like, there's just, I don't know. I get frustrated sometimes, because I feel like, I even talk to Miles about this sometimes. It's like, I don't want to have to sell you how amazing of an opportunity it is. Like the internet is just insane. Like you can make endless amounts of money doing endless amounts of things. Like it's like this very long tail, crazy world. And I get frustrated sometimes because, early on, I would just tell everybody I knew, everybody I would just go on and on and on. I'd be like, you got to do this, you got to do that. And then eventually you're just like, man, I can't convince everybody, but like, it's here for you. And if you want to ask me, and if you want to double click into some of the stuff I'm sharing, like I'm happy to help you guys. I just think like it is interesting to see that, I do it for the folks that it's like obvious to, that like want it, right? That are inclined to it. And I feel like early on, I was sort of like between a rock and a hard place in terms of like trying to convince the world that they should be being an entrepreneur. And like, I realized like, that's just, maturing. Like that's just not the case. Yeah. And so I think of my stuff now, it's like, hey, like this is for a certain type of person. And if you're that person, like I am here for you type thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's the person that's kind of in the mindset that they know what they want. They just need that little bit of inspiration,
exactly.
or push, or a little bit of coaching kind of.
Yeah, just there, like right? A gentle, like I don't even like, and again, it's like I'm just a gentle push in the right direction for you to go and off on your own path, and you do your own thing on whether it's self-educating yourself on different platforms or taking courses, whatever. You sort of upscaling yourself. I'm like a very small part of that, but like if I can do that at scale with folks, then like I think that's where the impact comes from, right? But I'm not sitting here being like I'm changing people's lives. It's like I'm guiding you just a little bit, 5 degrees to the left, and your path kind of maybe goes, 100 or 1,000 kilometers down there, maybe a bit different because I just gave you that little bit of a push or something like that.
And your stuff really hits a really like a vast amount of different people, because like a lot of your stuff, you're kind of giving them like some entry level coaching and a little bit of a push, but then you're also going after some of the guys that have some legit positions, and like guys that could be sitting on a board or could be VPs of a company, mm-hmm. and you show them how to negotiate their way through different situations that happen, not just a raise and not but accountability and all mm-hmm. that stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to see that like there for sure is that crowd of like people that are well established that still can learn a lot of stuff from the stuff that you put out there.
No, totally. Like we did a video a few weeks ago, or a week or two ago, and it was a guy who was negotiating like a VP position. Yeah. And he wanted equity, and like how do you approach that conversation? Like, somebody off the street would be like, who on TikTok is interested in that? Like I'd be like, I don't know, like who? Like I don't know. But there's a lot of people that are on that scale that like are like, yeah, in their mid-20s, they're making good money, and they're like, how the hell do I get, climb the corporate ladder? How do I approach that conversation? What tactics do I use? And I think it's something you use at every level, from like entry level to like your top of the food chain. Like humans are humans. And if you know how to like, craft different arguments and advocate for yourself while not being, overbearing and all that kind of stuff. Like I love those videos, and negotiating has always been one that is very controversial because, people love to tell you that it doesn't work, or you love to tell, or they'll pick. I love it when they pick at the numbers that I pick, these arbitrary like examples that I pick, right? I do a lot of research to not be talking out of my ass, like being like, this is some random 20-year-old making $2 million a year. Like I'm not saying stuff like that, right. But like certainly like, I do there's an interest into those bigger positions with more money, more whatever. It's just like a more interesting storyline as well. So it helps because it helps those folks, and then also it's more engaging. It shows people that you could do well working a job. You don't have to be similar to what I was saying. Like you don't have to be an entrepreneur. You could do well working a job and climb the corporate ladder. And it's not this terrible, awful thing. Right. But if you want to be a business owner, that's fantastic too. So I'll show you both. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, yeah. That's great, man. The stuff you're putting out there is awesome.
Yeah. So I'm excited. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how it comes along. But yeah,
I think that's important too, to know that you don't have to appeal to everyone. Mm-hmm. I see that, especially in a bunch of an example. I mean, you could talk about it in a business stance, right? Like the best products that I've been involved with, they're actually not for everybody. Mm-hmm. They're for a target. They're for an audience, right? I think for us, we do that same thing. Like when Jamie and I have talked about this podcast and talked about what shit my dad could grow into, the things that we want to make sure is that, everybody, much like yourself, who not a dad today, mm-hmm. but like best believe there's dads out there, there's sons and daughters out there that might have the ambition or that might want to try something, but like to your point, you're trying to just kind of give them a soft roadmap. At least let them know you can think like that, or there is more out there. That's sometimes what I find is the missing piece, is to let somebody think big. That's not inherent in a lot of people. So we hope to do that. And of course, I've seen that on your show too. And when you're thinking big like that, you have to sometimes just start. We say progress over perfection, right? Get that first piece of content up, or start the channel, or do the thing that at least will give you a little bit of insight. Like when you were still working full time, saw an opportunity, you didn't stop this to do that. And that's where a lot of people fail too. Like I've done it entrepreneurially. I do it all the time. I try and make sure that there isn't this spot where I close one door so tight and the other door hasn't even opened yet. And now I'm stuck in the middle, right? That's a big thing too. So when you're thinking of the next big thing or the thing you want to try, there's always a way to just kind of try it without jumping into the deep end right away. Yeah. And I think that gets missed.
Yeah, I'm totally like, I'm a very much like a strong foundation guy. Like I know it's like, there's two schools of thought, right? Burn the boats. You got to do that, right? And then you're in, and then it's no choice but success, right? I get that mindset but like it takes a certain temperament, and maybe you guys are like that. I'm not like that. I think you guys are like that. I'm more so like, hey, like let me have a strong base, and then I'm not worried about food and my girlfriend and like my family and like all this shit. Like I'm like, oh, I can just focus on the thing. I guess let me ask you, like, what would you guys align with more?
Well, so I'd say I'll use the same example. Then the thing that I think a lot of people forget, like the methodology or the saying, burn the boats, the expression, burn the boats. Don't forget that those folks are already on the island, right? They've looked around and gone, there's some resources here. We're not going back. That's cool. I subscribe to that 100%, but that's what you did. You proved concept, and then you went, I can see it. I'm here, so I'm going to do it. And I'm going to burn the boats. I don't see anything wrong with that. What do you think?
No, my approach is always, the more I get involved in something else, I don't close the door at all on that other opportunity, because my goal with those other opportunities is to scale them to a point where somebody else can take them over and explode them. So, closing the door on something just because something else looks like it's going to be doing better definitely isn't the right answer in my books. I'd say, keep the other door open, spend a certain amount of focus, but before I get into that other thing, I know what my goal is with that. I'm not just going to pass it by because this, new butterfly came floating around and looks pretty.
But like, I guess let me ask you guys. You guys are much more established in business than I am. I would ask you, like, what. Like, the saying, like, cut your losers, like in just investing. But like in business particularly, like, I guess for you guys, like, when do you guys know when you should close the door and you're just like, yo, like, is it just month over month? Is it numbers? Is it a feeling? Is it like, I'm sure you guys have come into that situation where like, man, this isn't working. And like, I have to like, this hurts. Like, how do you guys delineate that?
So
you go first.
Yeah.
You go first. That's a great question.
For me, it's a little different because in investing, I've had a ton of losers. Like, I'm not a great financial investor in the stock market. Thrown a few Hail Marys and done pretty well on a few Hail Marys, but I don't count that as investing. I call that like gambling because that's all that was. But it's hit a few times. In business, I've probably had 11 businesses, maybe 12 businesses. I've never had one that I've started up or got involved in that went to zero, except one that I knew, and this was only like 2 years ago, one that I knew was in really, really bad shape, and I got involved to try and help solve it, but I had a ton of protections in there where there was nothing that could come back and bite me. So that one, like within like 6 months, we knew we had to close the door. There was just like, I couldn't come in and try and fix it. But I've never had one that like I've started or been heavily involved in that didn't succeed.
Or maybe it's maybe it's not the business, maybe it's the product line or like a service you guys offer, and you're like, this still makes money, but it doesn't make that much money. But like this thing that we're doing is making way more money, way more margin there. Like, let's shut that off. Versus like, I don't know, I have buddies that run businesses and like they have way too many fucking products. It's like,
For
dude,
sure.
this one is like it's 80-20 thing. Like this one's making 80 or 70% of your revenue. Like, why don't you just go all in on that? So like, how do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I could talk to that on the product side. So I had a business for a little while where we had well over 1,000 SKUs, and the way that that business ran is we went to market and we got our intel back about 2 weeks after a new product launch would happen. So we knew we'd put it up on display, and we'd get our data back in 2-week increments. So what we ended up doing is just doing the minimum viable product, right? Like doing the thing that we could put it up and just see. You know, so the older I got and the more we got into that business, it was about that methodology of like, let's test it first. Let's see first. That's my favorite way to eliminate risk on those kind of things. And then as you slowly scale them up, then you just, you know, you like, I don't mind going double in or double down on what I know is working, and vice versa. Like, I don't get emotionally attached to anything I'm selling. I never have. So it's easy for me to just look at the data. So the answer to your question is I'm pretty data driven when it comes to that. But like, I don't mind taking an L. Like, I mean, how many times in my business life I've been looking at a fucking loss right in the face and just went, that's going to hurt the ego.
I think it depends on what your goal is with the business too, because like those decisions really make a big difference depending on like, there's usually one of three categories. Either you run a family business, which most people believe their business is like a business that's sellable or a business that's scalable, but it's probably a family business. And then there's a business that you're growing to sell. And then there's a business that you're just looking for rapid growth. And in those, there's all different goals, right? Because like a family business, their margins are usually the best. Their overhead's usually the lowest. When you go to a business that you're trying to scale to sell, your margins are usually pretty small. Your bottom line is what's most important because you're trying to get, you know, the best EBITDA you can get. And the other way, when you're just trying to scale it to grow yourself rapidly, your margins are smaller because you're, you know, watching your other stuff. So then your decisions on what your, you know, what your product line are going to be streamlined based on what's your best margin ones and which ones are going to help you get that scalability, right? So I think it really depends on which funnel you kind of fall under. Because if you're the family business and you're making 40-point margin on, you know, everything that you're doing, you probably care less about that, and you're willing to take on, you know, more products, more lines, because you have that flexibility. So I think it depends on where your goals are with the company too.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like I said, like I'm so fascinated by that because I just see it all the time. Like, you know, especially in my world, like there's so many creators that run businesses now because, you know, they've diversified from advertising and things like that. And you know, there'll be, you know, this crazy, you know, first of all, there's examples of them raising money. You know, there was this one that raised like, I don't know, 50 or 60 million bucks. And like literally, like I knew on the back end, like a month later they laid off like 50 or 60% of their folks.
I'll tell you too, just in and this is my own personal opinion of this, just because I've got a few more gray hairs and I've seen this happen. A lot of the time, the hustler is a different guy than the CEO. I've seen guys that hustle and started out of nothing. Doesn't matter what it is, but hustle. You know, understand how to grind, put the work in, do the thing, get it to a point where all of a sudden, okay, maybe there is a round of financing coming, or okay, maybe like you got a few people on the board that are talking IPO or whatever it might be. You can't assume that the hustler can become the CEO. And those are very different roles. Once you've got 50, 60 headcount, once you've got investors, you know, that's a different language. There's a lot of guys that can do it, that can go from, you know, from street to boardroom or whatever analogy you want to do. But I see businesses fail at that point. I see a lot of guys that had the grind to get it somewhere, don't have the discipline or the knowledge to even understand what an injection of $30 or $40 million means. Like it's just a different person.
Yeah. And a lot of times like a smart business owner can be his biggest problem if his goal is to grow, or if it does grow and it ends up going sideways. Because a lot of guys that start a business, build a business, get it to a large size, their ego grows too. they're afraid to hire somebody that's smarter than them.
Yeah.
The best thing a business owner can do is hire people smarter than them.
Mhm.
You know, like we all hire Miles. We have no clue what how to do his job.
Yeah.
But a lot of CEOs or business owners are afraid to hire those people, right? Because they don't want somebody that's going to be stepping on their toes, or that could make them look bad in a sense. But really, like, the best way to lead a company is to let people excel and and win. Let those people win. You don't have to be the winner. Let those people win.
Yeah.
And those are usually the guys that can scale companies and continue to grow them, where a lot of the ones that can get it to the point, convince people to throw them a bunch of money and give them a raise, they usually, like, a lot of them fail after that point because they don't hand over the reins to where that company should go. And that's not what that person has done.
Sure. Or hand off the right reins to the right person, right?
For sure.
Like, so many people that I've seen that do really well, or the ones that I have the most amount of respect for, are the ones that can tell you what they're terrible at.
For sure.
Can say, I am never going to be a CFO. I don't have the discipline. I don't run the numbers. I'm just not that guy. And then they go out and find the perfect candidate for that role.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous, once that person gets dialed in, they're going to be huge.
For sure.
So I would encourage, anybody listening to this too, to really do, again, going back to being data driven, do the analysis on yourself. What are those blind spots? Either level up in those areas or consciously don't go there. Find the person, find the partner, find the hire to round out that skill set. Because ultimately the data is in sales, it's looking at bottom line. But in the moment, the data can actually be interpersonal. You can say, oh man, that didn't fit. I fucked that up.
Yeah.
And either fix it yourself, self-improve, or backfill, find the resource.
So how are you guys? Because there's and I keep doing this two schools of thought thing, but sort of the conventional knowledge around, business is removing yourself, work on your business instead of working in your business, and all the sort of tropes and things like that. But then now there's this sort of, it's emerged sort of on Twitter and, different startup circles or whatever, but it's this thing called founder mode, where you're just given the company isn't too crazy big, hundreds or billions of dollars or whatever, you should be in every friggin' detail, and you should have your hands on everything, and micromanaging is sort of in, and it's there's a value to that, because then there's been examples of business owners that have sort of outsourced too much, and then they're not in the weeds, and then things get sloppy, and then they have to come in and play cleanup. So I guess it's two ends of that. So I guess where do you guys find in your businesses, how do you feel? Are you in the details, in the weeds, where you need to be, or you trust your people fully, give them full autonomy and let them do their thing? Because I feel I'd like to think I can outsource well, but I'm also very I'm in it. And maybe it's because of what I do. It's because it's so important. Every detail matters, but that's kind of true in everything. So I think about that. I'm curious how you guys approach that, because I've seen people outsource too much. I've seen people be bogged down and work 80-hour weeks when they've got a team of 20.
The tough part is a lot of people haven't done that 2 or 3 times, right? A lot of people are involved in one business and maybe have started up a second one, and and whatever their goal is with that one. But the problem is when people go down the path where you're saying, and they haven't done it before, they don't know what they're good at. They may think they know what they're good at, they may not. When you've done it 2 or 3 times, then you start to figure that out, and it's then you can start trusting people, right? Because then you know how much you need to be involved in the details, or how little you need to be involved in the details, and then you just trust. But when you try and do that your first time, or maybe even your second time, and you just you hire those people, and you're hey, now I've gotten it to this size, I'm just gonna hire 3 people, and they could take over running everything, and I can just sit back and go buy a place in Florida and take off for 6 months a year. Then you don't know how much of those details you should still be involved in, and you just kind of get lazy with it. I would never get to that point. I would hire somebody for pockets of it, but I still stay involved in the minor details. I just don't stay involved in making their decisions in those details.
Yeah.
Until you
give
see
them
some
that
red flags on the bottom, right?
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
Because trust is still a big thing. But the other big reason, back to your first point, when guys get that big raise, 50, 60 million bucks, or even if they've just scaled a company from $1 million to 5 or 6, and they start trying to live that life and hire those people, The other big problem that people have is they steal from themselves and they steal from their company.
What do you mean by that? Like,
they go from $1 million company in year one to a $5 million company in year 2.5, maybe 3. And then, okay, well, now I need to go buy a big cottage, and now I need to go buy a couple cars, not thinking like, hey, like your growth pattern's been, 1 to 5 million in 2-3 years. That's probably going to flatline soon or slow down at least. But your spending curve has gone like this now. And like, that doesn't change in people's minds. They don't suddenly go buy a cottage and a couple cars.
Do you guys see that a lot with, like,
oh man,
it's one of the biggest reasons for failures for sure.
Yeah.
And then, things slow down, but their spending continues to grow because like, they're not assuming like, well, now I'm going to have all these taxes on my house in Florida, my taxes here and maintenance and travel costs. Like, that's where a lot of people steal from themselves and end up killing their businesses that are successful businesses, but they steal from themselves and steal from the company.
Right.
Yeah. And I see that happen on every level, whether it's a company that's worth 200 grand or a company that's worth 200 million. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to what you're saying about financial literacy too, right? Like some of the startups that I've seen and I've been involved just even in some mentorship capacities where I've seen people have that success. That success can lead to access to credit, access to debt, because all of a sudden they have the sales to support that. So now they've got lines of credit, they've got credit cards, they can walk in and pick the whatever BMW they want and then walk out with it. The temptation is real. And I've seen a lot of guys go, well, they said that I can afford it, or they extended this lease offer to me for, whatever, and they go for it. But what they don't realize is that there is nothing to guarantee that you're on that trajectory forever.
No.
There's nothing to guarantee consistency. And when you over leverage yourself like that, because you've got the house, the cottage, the cars, the boats, that has to be serviced every month. You have to make those payments.
Yeah.
And I always like, and again, it's being an older guy, because if I rewind the tapes, I can remember what it was like to be a young guy and want all those things. You can have all those things, no problem, especially if you're on that path, but you have to be diligent today. You have to have the mentality of this could all go away. But get to a point where maybe you can pay cash for that BMW. And you've already paid tax on that cash, or maybe you can get to whatever level, right? Don't do it right away. Don't over leverage yourself because it's so tempting.
Yeah, people are afraid. Like when their companies are making money, they're not afraid. I guess it's they more get greedy because they see a big number in a bank account. But I had this happen like in one of my businesses like 3-4 weeks ago. One of my partners, there was 600 grand or something like sitting in a bank account that we didn't really need as cash flow. And he was like, oh, why don't we take it out as dividends before the end of the year kind of thing. He's like, I don't think it's good that it's just sitting there collecting dust. And I get that from one perspective, but say 3-4 months later, we go through and we go through a bit of a burn, things slow down, whatever, then the industry changes a little bit. If we take that 600 grand out and I went back to him 6 months later and I was like, hey, we both got to chip in 200-300 grand to pay some bills and, let those 30 employees get paid. I know he's not going to give it to me. Right. Or it's going to be a battle getting it. So that's a problem with a lot of businesses is they don't leave a cushion. They just believe that like, hey, like 2019 to 2023 was a great 4 years. 2024 and 2025 are going to be the same. And there's a ton of businesses that are going out of business over the last 18 months because of that. They don't leave any cash flow. Everybody got COVID rich, right? Like a ton of businesses got COVID rich that were startups in 2018, 2019, 2020, and they've just never seen the other side of that. They didn't go through the 3 years before COVID as, businesses were all kind of sitting flat for a while. And now they get to a flat line and it's like, well, you over leverage yourself. You don't have the money to put back into the company. I'm okay with letting money sit there. Like, you don't need to change your lifestyle to feel successful. You know what I mean? Like, that money's there. Let your business grow. Know that your people are still going to have a job a couple of years from now if things were to slow down a little bit. Because there's no worse feeling than if, a business is going sideways and you got to go lay off a bunch of people that built your lifestyle 100%. And now you're pissing it away.
One thing I've noticed with like my content and just like sharing some of these principles is like, like one of my favorite books ever is Profit First by Mike McAllowitz. And it's basically like a personal finance book for business owners, but basically you take your profit as soon as you get paid or from a client or something like that, like you put away 20-30% of that, like off rip to a separate account, out of sight, out of mind, that collects interest, whatever. And like, so you don't end the end the year and being like, why aren't we profitable, or why are we, you know, in the red or whatever. As assuming you're not reinvesting that all in growth or whatever. And I just love that. And I've come across business owners that like make millions of dollars a year, but like spend millions of dollars a year. And like, you'd think there's, I guess, you know, in general, you would think that somebody who makes that much money would spend like a second thinking about how to manage it.
For sure.
Or but like a lot of them aren't CFOs or aren't financially minded or aren't really financially literate in their own lives, or like, you know, rife with credit card debt and like status and stuff like that. So I remember when I was younger, it's like, man, like, you know, focus on revenue, blah, blah, blah. But now I'm like, yeah, dude, like there's so many business owners that like just don't, their personal finances aren't even in order. So how the hell are their financials for their company going to be in order?
They've got a great idea that's built some good money.
Yes.
But they've seen no business adversity yet. And once that hits, they're screwed.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't know what that, like, sometimes you got to live through it a little bit. Sometimes you got to fail, like, because it's not, it becomes real when it happens. You know, even like your content is great because it is as real as it can get, right? You're role playing out the scenario, but there's some people that have to be in that seat to feel it, or, you know, touch the stove to know it's hot kind of thing. But that's where, you know, what I like about the content that we have today, and I hope we're one of the, you know, contents that are out there that are doing this, is all we're trying to do is put it out there and hope people listen. You know, because I would love if we can just share knowledge, have people that maybe, you know, one of our founding principles is just let's create mentorship. Let's create a learning environment. Let's create a little, you know, band of brothers where we can all kind of share our combined knowledge and then benefit from it. And I think that's potentially what could be the best thing that comes out of this podcast. And when I watch your content, you know, specifically on financial literacy, what are the very first tools that you would try and tell somebody? Like, let's say it is a younger listener. It's a guy or girl who's just getting out of high school, you know, starting to look at their first job. Like, what are those core foundational financial literacy pieces you would want to teach?
I think honestly, starting as early as possible to just have a few bucks, and I think experimenting with, especially if you're like a teenager or you have a kid or something like that, it's starting to make a little bit of money, is encourage them to make money in an unconventional way. Like, not necessarily from a job. Like maybe they can work at, you know, McDonald's or whatever, but like encourage them to like one thing I used to do is I used to flip things on like Facebook Marketplace. Like that was my thing. Like I would go and buy like a lawn chair and sell it to the next guy. And like, it's like the most classic hustler sort of story or whatever. Yeah. Some Gary Vee shit. Yep. Exactly. I literally got it from him like in 2015 or whatever. He's like, go garage sailing. Yep. Right. Fuck it. Okay. You know, and I started making like thousands of bucks. And I was like a young guy. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, this is crazy. That was my real first taste of like internet money, even though it was IRL. Like I used Facebook to facilitate it. Right. And I'm like, this is crazy. I'm like literally making money out of nothing. Like going to some rich guy's, you know, place. I'd pick up a couch. We'd go and sell it for like $200. But like, it was insanity. Like we would look at the money afterward and just think it's the most wild thing. So I would encourage, you know, I will hopefully encourage in the future, God willing, I have kids. Like I will encourage them to make money in like an unconventional way in that, or maybe like a sort of like under the table way, let's say, right? And then you kind of learn kind of how to like just think outside the box more creatively. And then obviously, you want to do the things when they turn 18, like open their TFSA and RSP, FHSA, start getting them contributing early, and just get them in the markets. And they don't need to make $1 billion. They could just get started with like index funds and exchange traded funds. Like I'm a huge guy on that, which are basically a bunch of stocks all in one. Very chill, passive, whatever. Just get started with that. But I really think that like building that muscle of like making money as early as possible is what I would like. I used to would be like budget and this and that. And I'm like, yes, that's important. Like budget, open credit card, like those are the foundational things, but like start making fucking money in a real weird, unique way as early as possible. And like, I think that's the path. Like, I think that's the way that you're going to start when you're in school and do all those things, right? Like go into high school, graduate, go to university or college or whatever, get educated at a higher level. Like that's a great thing. I'm a big proponent of that. Like the stats back that up. You can eventually become an entrepreneur, do whatever, but like have that base but like on the side, be tinkering with something. You know, if you're a software engineer, start building your own like app. If you're a plumber, like start doing some like side jobs, like that type of shit as early as possible is what I would 100%
get
say.
that fire burning.
Yeah,
early.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's the experience piece. Like, I love that. I love watching kids that are going out. I say kids, young adults that are going out that are trying to sell some shit, or you know, have the initiative to go out and create some commerce, right?
Yeah.
Because it is that muscle memory and you know, financial literacy. One of it is just the ability to make some money, right? And I think there's foundations in there like good communication skills. Make some eye contact. Shake a hand.
Well, it's so rare. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a teacher, and like I don't interact with, you know, kids like he would. He's a teacher. Apparently, like it's starting to become more and more rare. And you know, I'm a social media guy. I'm like a big, like I love, you know, it gets a lot of hate, you know, for screwing up the next generation. But apparently, like foundational social skills are like sliding in a really big way with the next gen, like Gen Alpha or whatever. So doing these kinds of things is like super important, like formatively to like, you know, we're on a, you know, shit my dad taught me podcast, but like a fucking firm handshake matters. Like eye contact matters. Like how you present yourself like matters a lot. And just because, you know, there's people like me making money online where I technically don't need to talk to fucking anybody in person, that doesn't mean it's not super important for like me still and like for every other person. So like that's never not going to be a thing, you know.
Absolutely.
In every profession,
everything
everywhere in the world. Like,
doesn't matter what you do.
So that's you know, that is so important, and it's so easy. Like, this is the thing where like you don't have to not go to school, you don't have to not get the job, you don't have to, you know, not hang out with your friends. But like you could do one thing this weekend to try and make some money. You could find the thing that's in the house that nobody wants that should go up and go for sale.
I liquidated my parents' place. Like liquidated.
There's a guy near my house, like 4 blocks away. He literally just goes to Foot Locker and goes to normal stores, buys, you know, Jordans at full rip.
Yeah.
Or if they go on sale, you know, 15-20% off, keeps the receipt. Then he posts it on Facebook Marketplace or on his Instagram, and he sells the exact same pair for $25 or $30 more with the receipt, and people know, like, hey, this guy's making $25 or $30 on it, but he's just that ease of use for, like, you know, something that's readily available. And when he hits it good, then he finds one that, like, hey, like he's able to get like 4 or 5 pair on sale, or it's a limited edition, they were still available kind of thing. And then he makes the extra $75 or $100 on them. But he's a 14-year-old kid that's just out there, like, you know, he's dropping $1,000 at Foot Locker, comes home, and then he makes himself $150, $200 off.
That's amazing. 20%. Like,
and there's no lie, there's no bullshit to it. He's like, here's the receipt. So like,
straight up. I bought this at Mapleview like last week.
And I think, you know, if I was talking to a young person on this, I would say, don't sleep on the $40 or $50 profit.
No, totally.
Don't sleep on that, because everybody sees the, you know, the Benz, the whatever, the big house, the whatever, and they're like, oh, it's millions of dollars. Yeah, man. And they got their $30 at a time.
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
Right? Like, I listen to a kid that's doing that, and I'm like, yeah, I love that for 100 reasons. But the compounding effect of that, and when he does hit that sneaker where it is $100 margin, and now that accumulates
for sure.
And then you talk to a guy like Nate or follow his examples, and now that guy's invested. He's compounding. And like, it's like, well, that started by doing nothing.
No, totally.
And then you got his buddy who's sitting in the basement playing fucking Call of Duty, who's bitching about no opportunity, no work.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's out there.
And he needs another $50 game card from his parents, so he gets some new fucking skin or something, or level up four levels or something.
No, and it's crazy too. And I want to say, like, a lot of kids too, man, that do that shit will like hear it from their boys. Will be like, yo, like, it's so weird. Why you doing this shit? Like, blah, blah, blah. It's like, you have to, like, if I were to talk to like a parent, because I'd imagine most people listen to like have kids, eventually it'll just be, you know, people looking for guidance and everything. I would say that, like, you also kind of have to really not give a shit about like what people think about you. You just have to kind of ignore it. Like, no, like, if they're not supporting you, like, they're out of your life, and like you can just focus so that you don't need that distraction, so you can work on whatever you want. Like, I had, you know, so much support with what I did. But like, I have, you know, friends that maybe in a different friend group or something like that. And like, you know, they come to me and be like, dude, it's crazy. How did you like, you know, have the balls to do that or whatever? I was like, dude, like, I don't know. Like, when you have a good circle around you, like, fuck, I've got a great family, great friends, like, whatever, who cares? If this crashes and burns, like, I don't care. I feel well supported. If you don't have that,
for sure,
fuck, man. Like, you like, I was talking to this guy. He's like, you know, I want to do these kinds of things. I want to like create content. I want to like start this business. I want to do this. I want to do that. But like, my boys just think it's so whack whenever I post things on Instagram. And I'm like at first I'm like, who gives a fuck, bro? But then you also have to put yourself in that mindset, like, dude, like this is who his people are. And like, we are social creatures. Like, of course that's gonna weigh on you being like, dude, I don't want to be weird. And I think people get hung up on that a lot. So you literally just have to be really intentional about just like separating yourself, right? Like, we're talking about these examples of kids flipping stuff, doing on Facebook Marketplace, whatever. Like, I remember, like, I would get texts being like, yo, why are you spam posting on Facebook right now? Like, it's so annoying. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm up $200. Like, back then that was like 200,000, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of need to slide it off, but then also like you need to create that tribe that's like going to support you and uplift you to like do those things and enable you to do those things, right? It's not just like ignore all the noise. It's like you got to like adjust the noise, change the noise. Don't just fucking ignore it. Like, you've got to completely remove yourself, you know?
I'm a huge believer in you hang out with the people you want to become. And that's what's going to motivate you to keep pushing. So they don't necessarily have to be people that have more money. They don't have to be somebody that like is, you know, has everything in the world. It's just, it's got to be people with the same kind of goals and the same ambition, because those are the people that are going to support you and you're going to support them.
Yeah.
So you notice that like as you start growing and as you start, you know, getting better and, you know, doing things at a different level, your friends slowly start to change too.
Yeah.
Like, I've still got a couple buddies that I've had for years and years, but like they don't get involved in all that other kind of shit, but they also don't chirp you for all of that shit either, right?
Totally.
But I find that like your support group definitely changes over the growth of where you personally go and where your business is growing.
Yeah. And I try to slam that to like everybody around me in terms of just like, dude, like you just have to change the group. Like, it's just, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
For sure.
If these guys just, or these, you know, girls or whatever just aren't doing it for you, like, it doesn't have to be like a hard stance, whatever, crazy, like, I'm done with you guys or whatever. It could just be like, just slowly over time. Just
goes back
really,
to what we were
like,
saying about closing doors, man. It's the same thing with people in your life. Like, if somebody, you know, does something that you're like, man, that's just not aligned with who I'm trying to be, you don't have to slam that door shut.
No.
Like, just let the door fucking close itself.
It will close.
It will.
Yeah. Because I've noticed, like, and like I said, you know, as we fucking talked about a million times, I'm younger than you guys. But what I've noticed in my few years of adulthood is that, like, it just gets harder and harder and fucking harder to get together with people. And it doesn't get any easier. Like, I'm going to have a kid, I'm going to see like one guy a year. You know what I mean? Like, it gets harder and harder and harder. And
that's when your friends group changes big time. Once you have that first kid.
Exactly. And my point is that, like, it gets easier and easier and easier to ignore them because because you guys are just way like there's not high school, there's not social, like there's not as much of a social lubricant there to like have that happen. So it gets easier and easier over time as you age to create your own group, because you're very intentionally have to go out of your way to meet with these people because you've got so much shit going on. So I've always say, like, dude, this is a problem that will take care of itself. Just stop putting in effort and it'll just evaporate.
And pre-kid, you think you have to have all these people as your friends. You feel like, you know, this is my group. This is the way life is. Like, I have to keep making sure I'm doing everything to keep these people to be my friends. Even though the 4 buddies are sitting in a basement and don't want to leave because they just want to play video games. You know, you want to go play baseball or like have fun in a group setting and do something different, right? So that definitely changes. Totally. As soon as you have a kid, it's like, those people are cut off anyways. Just because you got to put in 90% of your time with a kid and they don't get it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And find those passions as you go too, right? Like, you know, we all like playing sports, and you know, that'll lead to meeting great people. And all of a sudden it's like, shit, they weren't even in my story a chapter ago, but now like I see them twice a week or whatever, right? And that's just kind of the way it goes. So it goes back to what you were saying about being scared to do the thing. Like, just go do the fucking thing.
Yeah.
Like, nothing bad is going to happen. You can go back to Pepsi or go back to, like, just go do the thing.
Yeah.
And that's part of, like, I mean, it resonates in life and it resonates in business with just that ability to follow intuition, that ability to have the self-confidence to say, like, no, here's who I am. I might be a little different in 10 years, no doubt. And I was different 10 years ago for sure, but here's who I am today. Is that aligned with who I want to be? Yes, no. And you don't have to go slam the door. Just let it, just migrate away from it, go the direction you want. And it happens.
Yeah.
This place is kind of like exactly what he's doing with this podcast. Like, I find that 600 Brand is like, it's our incubator. Like, in the last 8 months, 6 or 7 different businesses here. And, you know, the goal of having everybody is like, you know, the goal is to empower each other to inspire others. And that's exactly what you're doing for people, right? So like, I think that's a big thing And it's easier to do when you surround yourself with the right people, because then you're doing it together. Like there's nothing worse than a person that wants to succeed on their own and wants to have a bigger house than all their friends and wants to have the boat but doesn't want their other friends to have the boat because they want to be that guy. Fuck that. I want me and my buddies to all have that boat. I don't want to have a big boat, but like I want us all to have that canoe and go canoeing together.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
I don't need that 52-foot boat because I don't give a shit about that stuff. But if you want it, I want you to have that. You know what I mean? I want everybody to succeed around me, because that's what makes great friendships. And then you know, there's no animosity and shit, because there shouldn't be. There shouldn't be jealousy. There shouldn't be like, fuck, if your next business goes to $50 million, like, fuck, I'm more than excited for it. You know what I mean? And I hope that you're going to be the guy that's going to, you know, empower other people to go do that same, make that same jump.
Yeah,
right?
totally. And
if mine only goes to $1 million, I'm not going to be unhappy for you. You know, like it's crazy.
And the big thing too is you know, I'm like a big guy now and like playing my own game, right? Like I think it's so easy, you know, when you're working for yourself or whatever, to see other people that work in a different line of business being like, they do, you know, 10, 20, 30 million, whatever. Like I need to be doing more. And I think I've gotten better over time. It still creeps in me like, fuck, I got to work harder. I think every entrepreneur probably in the back of their mind, probably at least once a day, like, fuck, dude, I got to grind. Like I got to grind way harder. And like, it's a good thing. That's why you do what you do. But like, you also have to remind yourself that, yo, you really are playing your own game. Like, especially with business, like it is fucking quite literally uncapped.
My father-in-law, who's a very successful guy by any stretch, shout out Daryl. He said to me early on, because like, you know, we've had the nights where we've drank too much red wine and talk shit. And I said to him real early on, this was probably like 15 years ago, I was like, what is the meaning of life? Everything you know. And he's a super well-traveled guy. And I said, what's the meaning of life? And he didn't even hesitate. He said, it's learning to live with yourself.
Yeah.
And that's all he said. And in the moment when he said that, I'm like, hey, learning to live with yourself. And he kind of went on and elaborated. And he said, much like what you're saying about it is really a one-player game at the end of that. You have to figure out who you are. Mm-hmm. You have to figure out who you want to be, because this is your game. Like, you get to decide who you want to be. And then you have to learn to create that player and learn to love that player. And the pieces around you could be, you know, great relationships and great family and business and, you know, whatever's in that. Jamie wants a canoe. Like, it could be whatever's in that mix. But then you just have to learn how to live with yourself and be okay with the fact that, yeah, I didn't get the canoe yesterday, but maybe tomorrow. Or yeah, you know, family not perfect, but like, you can't control any of that shit. No. And anybody that tells you that can be controlled, that's some egomaniac shit. Like,
but you can be, hey, why the fuck didn't I get it yesterday? And what can I do to make sure I get it tomorrow?
Totally. And try again.
Versus the other where they're like, oh, fuck, like I kept saying I'm going to get it and fuck, I can't get it. You know?
Yeah. Let me ask you guys too. I feel like I apologize if I'm like interviewing you. I'm so curious. Like,
we're the amateurs.
Yeah. No, I want to ask you, like, so, you know, we kind of talked about like, you know, delayed gratification in terms of business and like, you know, keeping money for a rainy day. I guess for you guys, how do you guys spend on yourselves? Because it is actually a muscle, and it's not talked about too much, but it's like, how do you spend thoughtfully on yourself? Because I think it's, for a certain type of person, it is easy to like sort of just push it to tomorrow and be like, I'm just gonna work. Like, how do you guys thoughtfully like spend out of yourself? How do you guys pay yourself? You know, when would you take dividends out of the company to be like, you know, let's go do something or whatever? I do think there's similar to what we've been saying. There's the business owner that's spending too much. There's a business owner that's not spending anything at all and is like living way under where they should. And it's noble to a point, but it's also like, the hell are you working so hard for if you're not, you know, enjoying it a little bit or like taking on your family, whatever. So how do you guys think about that with everything?
So you go first and then I'll go.
So depends on the opportunity. I've been in some businesses where the partnership structure was me and me alone. That gives you some freedoms, right? That may allow you to pull some dividends a little bit faster. But I think the best practice, having gone through a bunch of different partnerships, I think the best practice is to not fucking do it for as long as you can, man. That money sitting in that bank, it's yours. Whether it's in your pocket or not, it's yours. Just keep building it because that's how, you know, like, depending on the business, sometimes you have the need for cash, or sometimes the best idea comes along. if you have that cash, most times you can go out and even borrow against that. You know,
Mhm.
a bank will look at that and say, okay, you know, sales are up, and yeah, you've got some liquidity there. Okay, great. So it can allow you the freedom. So, you know, me now, if I was a younger guy, I would be the guy who's preaching live within your means.
Mm. Mhm.
Just live just enough and just put it away and just let it keep going and focus on yourself, focus on your business, and then
Mhm.
let it just keep growing because it's your money, even if it's in the business bank
Totally,
account. So
totally.
just let it happen. But you know,
Yeah.
that's me now. Me when I was in my 20s, I mean, I've owned fucking I counted the other day, like I've owned over 25 BMWs. That's irresponsible.
Yeah.
Really
Fair.
fun, but
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
irresponsible. But the
Yeah.
answer is let it grow.
Yeah.
I I don't like I'm not a big toys guy. I'm not a big house guy. I'm not so for me it was pretty simple and it still is. So the way I'm structured is I own all my shares in a holding company.
Mm-hmm.
My holding company owns 100% of the shares or whatever my part of the shares are of all of those other companies. I'm only employed by one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been employed by one of them for 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
I pay myself the amount that I need to live the life that we live, which isn't some crazy lavish lifestyle, but it's no, it's also no poverty lifestyle.
Yeah.
And we're happy. Like I make sure in what that number is, we're able to take, 2 trips a year if we want to go on a couple trips. We want to go out for dinner whenever we want, we can do that stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not a crazy number,
Mhm.
but it's a number that company can afford to pay me, and it's justifiable that if I wasn't there, would I pay somebody else this to run that company and make the
Yeah.
money? 100%. I'd
Mhm.
pay them the exact same I'm paying myself. All of that other money that my companies make, I never personally touch. I let that grow into those companies, or I cycle it back up to the holding company, and that's what gives me the ability to go do other ventures. So
Mhm.
I'll never touch that money or pay it out to me personally. I'll always keep it in the company because I have that steady amount coming in, and I don't need to go, buy a 20,000 square foot house. I don't need to pull out $4 million to go buy some, a couple crazy cars or something. That's not me.
Yeah.
So for me, it's pretty easy because
It's just like it's not even like
I don't need to show. I'm not a show guy, right?
Yeah.
And it lets all of your money continue to make you money instead of you paying crazy taxes on it, right? Like
Yeah.
if I pull that money out, I'm going to pay 50% tax on it. So what the
Yeah.
fuck was the point in
Well,
that, right?
and that's a good segue to also say too, man. Like the answer is always different depending on your lifestyle and
For
business
sure.
structure and whatever. Pay somebody to give you that answer. Go
Mhm.
find a great CPA and say what is the right structure, right?
Mhm.
Like because odds are if you're succeeding, it's not just going to be one company. They're going to tell you spin up a numbered co, or they're going to tell you here's how we're going to invest. Like
For
spend
sure.
the money to go talk to professionals. Like everybody listening to this, if you're in business, you should have an awesome lawyer. You should have an awesome accountant.
Mhm.
At
Yeah.
the very minimum,
Yeah.
probably a bookkeeper too for most people.
Yeah.
But do it now. Like I know so many guys that are like, well, I can't really. I'm not even paying myself. I can't. Whatever.
Yeah.
Fuck that. Those
It's so
people pay for
important.
Well,
themselves.
and
Yeah.
guys approach me and they're like, well, how do I scale my business? How do I do this? How do I grow it so that I have an exit strategy later on? And almost every one of those people aren't set up legally or, or mindset wise to even go down that path.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yeah.
they own, a lot of them are sole proprietors, and it's like, well, you haven't changed your mindset to like, hey, like you need a corporation. Like, well, I don't want to do that because then I'm gonna have to pay, corporate taxes every year, and I gotta pay an accountant to do this, and that's $5,000 a year. And it's like you've got to change your mindset. Like if you're doing this to grow a business, grow it as a business.
Yeah.
Right? And there's cost to that.
Yeah.
But in that, there's also protections that you want. And it's not just, oh, I need a hold co so that I can't get sued by this company. It's like, no, there's a ton of tax reasons
Yeah.
to have all of these different setups. So usually the first conversation, once they've kind of given me that breakdown of what their setup is, it's like, okay, well, you've got a budget like basically 10, 15 grand to go open these 1 or 2 or 3 companies.
Mhm.
But then after that, you're going to have a ton of flexibility, and it's going to save you in the next 12 months on all your taxes.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
No, it's
I'd way rather pay 15% income tax on whatever I'm making than pay 50
Yeah.
if I don't need to access it right away.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then let that money make you more money.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then there's other people that are like, oh, well, there's 500 grand sitting in their account, so I'm gonna pay that to myself, but then I'm gonna go max out my RRSPs on it. And it's like, well, that's great. So you paid a bunch of income tax, you save some income taxes on our RRSPs, but then you're gonna pay 50% income tax when you pull out those RRSPs later on, right? Like
Yeah.
if you don't need it, and you can still be contributing to your TFSAs and RSPs through what you make. You don't need that big lump sum thing. Let that money make money, because it'll make you more money in the long run.
Yeah,
right?
corporation's like a great tax deferred vehicle.
For
like
sure.
You know, I and it's when I first started, like I couldn't believe how little the first 500 grand you pay tax in Ontario. It's like 12.2% or something like that, and then over that it's more. But that's remarkable. And when I tell my friends in the United States that like they have LLCs, like those are pass through corps, right?
Yeah.
So they're paying like effectively like 35% on pretty much everything they make, no matter if they pay themselves, they don't, whatever.
Right.
Versus here, it's like, no, that thing is like a really separate entity. You do not have to take it out. You could defer it to whatever. We don't necessarily in Canada. We don't necessarily have to take anything out. We're not under a sort of like
You're not forced to claim.
We're not forced to or like pay a reasonable salary. Like you should ish, but like to be honest, like it doesn't actually matter. You can just keep it there as long as you want. Like every single corner store owner you know, or doctor or lawyer, whatever, like why were they so mad about the cap gains thing? Well, their entire wealth is in their corp. And it's like for good reason, honestly, because it's like, again, like even with the capital gains tax being the inclusion being higher, it still makes sense to have a lot of it there because you pay so much personally if you take it out.
It's just funny you're bringing that up, because the biggest problem that professional corp holders have is they don't know how to get it out later. So it is great right now because of the capital gains stuff, but when they want to get it out, there's huge tax implications. Because like, say you're a dentist or a doctor and you have your own practice. If you died tomorrow, your kids literally only get 20% of whatever that professional corp has, because the government's going to take its 50% right away.
Yeah.
And then they're going to pay inheritance tax of probably close to 30%.
Yeah.
So there is a ton of whole life policies and other types of policies out there that are specifically directed at those kind of professional corps that most of those professional corp holders have no clue about, because the same thing, they're really smart business owners for their business, but they've never been in a different business and they don't really understand what's available. So as much as like a professional corp's the right way to go for those reasons, they're the ones that need the biggest help from those whole life policies. And like they work, like I've got one in almost every one of my corps. I've got 3 on, like each of my kids have one of those whole life policies, because it creates a huge exemption for your capital gains tax.
Yeah.
And it's one of the only loopholes out there for it, and not a lot of people know how to do it.
Yeah, that's the thing about whole life. Like it's maybe for the average Joe, it's like doesn't make much sense to probably just do term, but like for estate planning and things like that, like it can really create those protections
100%.
And have a thoughtful sort of strategy around like that, because it's like, yeah, Ontario and like Canada, like we get wrecked on, probate and like everything. Like it's like you can't even die without paying money, right?
For sure.
It's hilarious,
Well,
but
some
it's
of
true.
them can be huge. And to give a shout out where it's due too, we'll shout out Matt Stevenson. Have you met Matt?
I think briefly.
He's just a master at it. And if you're listening to this and you are one of those guys that have had some success and have some money, don't feel like you have to pay all the tax on that. Pay the fair tax. But a guy like Matt Stevenson, he'll walk you through that, because again, so many of the guys that were the hustlers turned CEO, but then there's even after the CEO, now you've got an estate, and that level of wealth is a different game as well too. So that's when you really need to put some people on your bench. And then I'll give a shout out to Marco Simone, who's one of my accountants. He's amazing too. So if you're listening to this and just need some good guys that would take a coffee and share some thoughts, I'd plug both of those guys.
And there's the other guys that need that too, right? There's the guys that are building a business right now that their goal is not to hand it down to the kids. It's not for the kids to inherit the business or the family to inherit the business. Their goal is to sell the business and exit, 3X, 4X, whatever their goal is. Usually those guys don't have anything set up either for that. And that's the other huge, benefit of having one of those whole life policies is they have a lot of things that'll cover those people on an exit strategy, whether it's a $10 million exit, a $50 million exit. There's policies built around those that set it up that over the next 5, 10, 15 years, however you want to position it, that those policies will stick around to give you that ability to pull that money out of those corporations on an exit sale without paying 75% tax.
Yeah. I guess, have you guys heard of the concept like dying with zero?
Yeah,
like
for sure.
Like what are your guys' opinions on that? Because like I guess you guys have done well in business and you're going to continue to do really well. Like, how do you guys think about like philanthropic stuff? Because like you guys do a lot in the community. You guys are very involved. You guys really enjoy that kind of stuff.
I think for me, it changes over time because like my goal right now is what's my number that I have in mind that I have to hit for me to be able to pull back and just passively have income coming in where I don't have to go to work if I don't want to. I don't think I could ever get to the mindset where I don't go to work or don't want to, but I do want that choice. So like, you know, if that I'm 43 right now, if my goal was, hey, like at 46, I want to be able to pull back and just be able to live off whatever the passive income would be at like a low risk kind of thing. What is that number? And that number has to include how comfortable are my kids going to be if I were to die tomorrow. If I die tomorrow, I want to make sure my kids are able to afford a house, which most kids aren't going to be able to afford a house probably for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
Most parents or grandparents are going to be selling their homes or their condos to be able to give their kids enough money to put a down payment or to have a house. I want to make sure that they're set up that they have a home and some money to get them going. So that number would slowly change as like, okay, if something were to hit and, you know, we have one that really takes off or something, then maybe then there's more of a you know, donate some money to a charity on the exit kind of thing. But like, I think that number changes because I'm not at that point now that I would consider, you know, having that amount because I want to make sure that my kids are going to be covered. And, you know, everybody's number for that is going to be different, obviously. Depends on what level of life you want to start living. If you want a private jet, then you know you're probably going to be doing this a lot longer than I want to be doing this.
Yeah. That's fair.
Or hit a few more home runs. So
do you guys find that the goalpost moves for yourself?
for sure.
Like how has it evolved over time? Like how do you protect against that? Because I find it moves all the time for me. Like I'm like, okay. Every time you hit something, it's like, well,
I'll tell you the big one that's going to move for you is when you have kids. That was different for me, and that's still, you know, to answer the legacy question. Like I'm nowhere near the number I want to be at. My foot is hard on the gas and will be until who knows, probably ever, because like I understand that there are levels to the game, and I understand that life happens. So I just want to build a cushion. I just want to have some peace and make sure that, you know, when my family needs anything, I can help. Because I've just you know, I've seen when things go wrong with other people, and that scares the shit out of me. So mine is safety, security, and I don't know what that number is, but I'm not there yet.
It does change. Like I was at that point 2 years ago. Like my goal was at 41, or 42, I wanted to be able to shut down, sell everything up here and take off. And I was in that mindset. I was totally good with it. I was at the number that I needed to be, but I couldn't get the wife on board with, hey, like, let's sell what we have here, get out of the hustle, and, you know, take off and go move to an island or move to Middle Texas.
So you were fully like going to do that.
100%. And I didn't really care where I was going to go. Like, you know, my wife's from Europe, so I was like, cool to go to Europe. I was cool to go to Costa Rica. I was cool to go to Texas, you know, like, because anywhere we were going to go, there's still always the opportunity that if you want to fire something up, you find a way to fire something up. And there's a way to make money everywhere. So I wasn't worried about not having the opportunity to do something. It's just I was in the mindset I didn't want to do anything. And we were at the point that the kids could have a good life. We could go do that. But I couldn't, when it came to the 11th hour, she wasn't fully on board with that. More on the kid side. She was worried about, like, we've got 3 boys. 5, 11, and 14. The 14-year-old now is, you know, he's in his first year of high school. A ton of his friends live right around the house. They hang out all the time. So she was more worried about the kids and pulling them out of that, where, you know, kids are resilient. They could get over that. I moved around a ton of times when I was young. I think it makes them stronger. And your friends group changes a ton anyways.
Oh, thanks, man.
Over those 10 years of schooling, like, you're not usually friends with those kids by the time high school's finished anyways, right? But because I gave in and I wasn't going to push it and, you know, upset the family and rock the boat, then I had to change my mindset again and be like, okay, well then if we're sticking around to the area of the hustle and, you know, keep up with the Kardashians kind of lifestyle, then that number's got to change. So then I got to move that goalpost and remotivate myself, which was simple. Like, it's not hard to fire yourself back. Like, when you're in that mindset, it's not hard to fire yourself back up.
No, not at all.
So it happened. Like, I had to do it. And now, you know, my goalpost is hopefully like 3 years from now. She's more on board with doing something a little different. If not, then, you know, move it again. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Fair. It's not necessarily like a bad thing. Like, I think, I'm like that too, where I could never, ever, 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 see myself like not tinkering or working on something or being a part of something or whatever. And I don't think that's necessarily like the goal. Like I know there was like the whole FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. Like I don't really ever think the retire early thing was like an actual thing. Like people literally that would, if you're the type of person to get to like, $2 or $3 million by like 35, right? And it's all in the stock market, and then you pull out and you pay yourself 70, 80 grand a year, and like you just live off that. You could do that forever, like theoretically, right?
Depends where you live. You can't do that in Southern Ontario.
Yeah.
You can move to North Bay and do that.
Sure. Like wherever that's permissible, you could do that, right? For some people, it would be a lot more money. But the point is that if you're the type of person that grinds that hard, that gets to that kind of person, like you're not the type of person to just mail it in for 70 years and just live off money. Like some people, maybe, but like most people get bored. And it's like, what are they going to do next? And like, I don't know. I've listened to so many stories and actually talked to a few founders where like, yeah, man, like they get such existential dread once they sell their companies and they don't know what the hell to do with themselves. So they just like make themselves busy or whatever. And eventually they just end up working some more. And it's interesting. Like, I think if you're the type of person to get there, like you're eventually going to make yourself busy with something. And I don't really, so it's more so financial dependence, like having that flexibility, but like the retire early thing, like I think you'll always be working on something, whether it's making money or not, right? When we're talking about like the sort of generosity and things like that, like, or being a part of like your kid's sports team at like a really high level, or like taking something like super seriously that like, because you have the financial flexibility to do, right? Become like a crazy triathlon or Tough Mudder or whatever. Like you could just dedicate yourself to that.
For sure.
But like, I think the idea of just like having a number, hitting it, and then just like going on a beach and just, that's all you do. Like you'll drive yourself fucking crazy. Like that'll never happen. There's always going to be something that's sort of driving your attention.
No, we do have a couple buddies that are doing it
straight
right
up.
Now. Yeah.
Really?
So one of them was one of the hardest working electricians that we know. And he busted ass. Now his goal wasn't like 35. Like I don't know if I had to guess how old he is, maybe like 47, 48, somewhere around there. But like that was his goal, and that was his wife's goal, and they've done it. Like they're down in Barbados now. They've got 1 or 2 condos or townhouses down there, and they live there full time.
Oh, fair enough.
Like
fair enough.
And he's loving living that life. I got another buddy that same thing. He bought a place in Belize and did it, and that's what kind of like motivated me to want to do this. But those guys legitimately wanted to shut down. Now one of them, is doing like a little bit of stuff on the side just to kind of keep busy.
That's more so what I mean.
But not really. Yeah. He's not in business or like trying to start something or like trying to make a big push. He's just, I'm bored. Like I'll go be a project manager at this like side gig, what I mean? Like 3 hours a day and work on the, Bermuda time zone kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
no, I guess, like I said, it's a certain type of person.
Well,
like if you can do that.
And it goes back to that whole learning to live with yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like for some people, that's that doing that internal audit to just say like, what are the things? How do I live with myself? And for some guys, then it is a beach. And then there's other guys where, again, I can see it when you passionately talk about it. There's no chance you're that guy. But that's great though, right?
Maybe
that's
it is, but in 20 years, like, am I going to be saying the same thing?
Maybe.
You know what I mean?
Well, I've got buddies that are like, I've got this one guy who is working in a factory. He gets paid well, but it's a blue collar. It's a 9 to 5, 4 weeks of vacation every year. He's done the math and he knows that his last day of work will be when he's 61.
Mm-hmm.
And he's happier than a pig in shit about that.
Yeah.
Because he's just like, I know exactly when it's done. I know exactly what I'm going to do for retirement. At this age, my mortgage is going to be paid off.
Mm-hmm.
And he's on that path. And like, it's a peaceful path for him. It's, he's not trying to build an empire. He's not trying to change his community. He's not trying to be anybody other than himself.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a happy dude.
And I think the idea of retirement is different for different people too, right? Because for that guy, his goal at 61 is probably like, then I want to be able to go do what I want and travel and go spend time doing whatever he wants. Where if you're an entrepreneur and you're involved in a bunch of stuff and you've been successful, your idea of retirement is different because like really you could still be doing what we could still be doing what we're doing and take off for 3 months of the year.
Yeah.
And our businesses hopefully should be doing as well or as good as they are if I'm here, right? Otherwise, you're not really running a successful business if you can't take off for 3 months.
Yeah.
And if if it is going to fail, if you're gone for 3 months, then it's probably a family business. It's not a business that's sellable, right?
Yeah.
He could use the term a family business. What he means by that is really owner operator driven
Yeah, yeah.
and dependent.
And that's where you understand the grind.
Yeah.
Like that's where you learn it. You're putting your blood, sweat, and tears into it. Like none of us walked into a business that just suddenly took off and like we started making a ton of money. Like my first business, I put 3 years in grinding and grinding just to get it to like a break even point.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like so none of these are like, hey, like we all hit a home run right out of the gate and things just like explode. Like we had to understand the grind too. And all of those people that are in that position can do the same thing. It's just not a lot of them know what they've got to do to get to that next level.
Yeah,
And that goes
And that's
full
where
circle.
that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
getting
totally.
those people to that point where, hey, you can change your stars. You
Yeah.
can, and that's always been my goal in life is like, I want people to understand that they can change their stars.
Yeah.
I came from a hole in the wall, piece of shit, kind of upbringing where I wanted to change my stars and I was told that I was never going to be able to.
Yeah.
And that's what pushed me. I want other people to know that they can change their stars.
Absolutely.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a huge motivation for me, especially when you see somebody that realizes, man, I can get myself out of it. You know what I mean? Or pull myself out of it. Because same thing. Like I didn't come from much at all.
Yeah.
And like don't want to go on a diatribe, but definitely have to grind a lot to get to where I am. And like I think giving just a bit of that hope and that belief in somebody else is like super super important. And it's true.
What did you take in Western?
Well, I was actually in science before, and then I switched to business. I wanted to be a doctor, but I realized the reason I wanted to be a doctor was for the money, and I realized like, that's like if you're only in it for the money, you're just not going to cut it. And I realized like, there's actual people like crazy, like it's just a different breed of the people that go on to do medicine. And so I switched to business because I realized like I really enjoyed this. Like I took economics in my first year and I really enjoyed that. So I naturally found myself there and then kind of just like totally fell in love and like actually really enjoyed university and all the different classes and even like the accounting classes, I still serve me so well, like just in terms of like what we're talking about, like business and P&L and stuff like that. So
Did you find that you got in many disagreements with professors that like on the business side, maybe you didn't agree with like the kind of path that they're teaching and what they're telling kids?
yeah, I think like,
Because I know it's happened a lot. We hear a lot from people that like have that entrepreneur mindset, and like that's not the way most professors are teaching people.
Yeah, I think in some ways, yes. There's sort of like a conventional way of thinking, but like I would say like I actually didn't go. So we like Western has like business like Richard Ivey School, like the business school, and then there's like a BMOS program. So I was in the BMOS program, but like a lot of and I chose to do that because I don't know, like I didn't have the money, honestly. It was like 30 or 40 grand a year in tuition there. It was like 5 or 6 for me. So I was like, okay, that's a pretty easy decision. I think I'm going to figure this out no matter what. And I still don't regret it or anything. But one thing that actually Western was really good at was like they put a lot of money into entrepreneurship and like new, more conventional courses. Like I remember they launched like a sales course, just like a sales class, which like obviously is like the most important thing and like one of the most, if not the most important thing in business is like how to sell, how to be a good salesman, careers in sales, whatever. How does that affect your business, whatever. And I actually think my school was surprisingly a lot different because it really like there was a culture of like entrepreneurship. There was a lot of founders that came from our school. I believe the founder of Wealth Simple is from like went to Western, and we have like a really good entrepreneurship sort of like a background, but then there's also private equity and investment banking and stuff like that. A lot of those kids do that as well. So I think I was actually really lucky. And even my program, like we had a personal finance class just from my program where we were taught like how to invest and how to do this and that. And I remember that was like, that's rare. Not every school has that.
That's awesome.
So I thought Western did that really, really well. And I still go back every year and speak. They bring like a school that'll bring a guy like me to come in every year to talk to folks is good in my book. That they appreciate the unconventional sort of paths to like learning, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
It's crazy that they don't start trying to teach some of that stuff about personal finance in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the kids ages 12 to 18 that like need to get their feet wet learning that stuff, and there's nothing out there really other than stuff like what you're doing on social media.
I think there's some small like math stuff now, or like in the math, but I like in a big way, no. There still really is nothing in Canada. In the US a bit, but I'd say more so in Canada, like we're way behind on that. And like you talk to any kid.
It's just a life course. Like,
yeah,
here's your life course.
Like, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what you guys are doing.
We're trying to create it, bro.
There you go.
Shout out to Wealth Simple too. I'll tell you that we're not affiliated with them in any way, but probably the best looking, most intuitive finance app I've worked with. And I actually did this thing with my daughters early on because we were doing really small trades on there, like, you know, just to kind of play with it. And I played volleyball with somebody who works for Wealth Simple. And that was back in the early days. So she was like, hey, you should check out the whatever. It's a great app. What I did with the kiddos, though, again, as an adult, all my own money, all my own investing, I let them get involved. We went into their rooms and I said, you know, tell me your favorite toy. And one of them goes and grabs a Barbie and the other one goes and we'd recently been to Disney, so grabs Mickey Mouse. And I went, okay, do you know there's companies behind these products? And I used that as a way to say, okay, here's Mattel. Mattel does this, here's their structure. And we just kind of talked about a company and they kind of had this moment where they're like, oh yeah, like they sold that Barbie. They sold that thing. I spent money for that thing. So they kind of got that. And then on the other side, the Disney side, same thing. You know, Mickey, it's a product, it's a whatever. So we had that talk. And then I went on the app with them and we bought stock. So one bought Mattel, one bought Disney. I've still got them in my portfolio today. And I'll never sell them. But all I want them to see is that on a daily basis, things get sold, bought, traded. And here's what that looks like. And you're a part of the company. So fast forward, both of them had shareholder announcements.
Oh, really?
So we got these letters in the mail to say that there was I think it was for an AGM that was upcoming. And if we had any whatever. So then I got to kind of reinforce it by saying like, hey, look,
feel important.
You're valid. And obviously they're minors. I'm not letting them have shareholder rights, but still to say to them, like, here's how it works,
this is
right?
Your like,
and they got it. It was a moment where they clicked and they're like, yeah, of course. That's we're buying things. They're selling things.
How old are they?
So Lucy's 9 and Ella is 7.
That's awesome.
So when we did this like a couple years ago, and it was actually when it was right when we went to Disney. But it's that I don't know what the right way to do it is. I'm just a dad. We're all just guys.
Yeah.
But I saw an opportunity to just be like, I wonder if their little minds are ready for that. Like, and they were, right? So sometimes you get lucky on stuff like that.
That's sweet, man.
Because there's lots of ways to teach, and there's also lots of ways to learn. Like,
thank God you didn't do it with Blockbuster.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
But we bought some GameStop.
That's a great movie you rented. Yeah, let's buy a stock in that.
Yeah, I didn't take them down the crypto road yet. Like we weren't buying any BTC or anything. But so anyways, I digress. It's that. So my question for you then is, because you've obviously got a mind for this as well too. When do you think is the right age where a parent should start talking to the kids about money, about finances?
As soon as they start speaking, I think as early as you were saying, like try to get them more introduced to it as early as possible. Try to incentivize like games and ways that they can sort of learn, you know, the game of business, or there's so many different like apps and like ways that you could sort of introduce it way earlier than you could before versus like having them, you know, snore to death or whatever. I think at like 9 or 10, you know, you can kind of like understand things, and, you know, incentivizing them to like play like I think the best one is honestly like playing like with a stock market game or something like that. Like I know, like I think it's like RBC or like a lot of the banks like have like those sort of like fun money accounts. So just like playing stock market with your kid, and like it's just fake money, and you guys just have a competition, and it's like a month, and here's the stocks you can pick, whatever, and just making it a game out of it. That's probably the only way you'll get them engaged at that age. But once they get more familiar with it, then they can actually learn it at a more sophisticated level when they're a teenager and really grasp it. And then once they're 18, I mean, they fucking hit the ground running, and they're maxing out the TFSAs, and they're off and running and stuff like that. So I would say like try to implement those games, try to get that, like, again, just like the environment, create that environment. You don't necessarily need to sit them down and run them through everything.
For sure.
It's not going to work. I'll tell you that, full stop. But if you can make like a game and sort of create that sort of environment of learning, like the osmosis sort of happens over time.
And even saying the games, like my 14-year-old, when he was like 10 or 11, like he was heavy into Roblox.
Yeah.
All three of my kids are into Roblox, but he's not so much anymore.
Mhm.
But when he was into Roblox, you could develop your own games. So when he was like 9 or 10, he was developing his own games that other players would have to pay, 50 Robux for this or 100
Yeah,
Robux
yeah,
for
yeah,
this.
yeah. Stuff like
So
that, man.
instead of
yeah.
me having to like, because most kids nowadays are like, hey, like, can I have a $25 Robux card so I can go buy this in the game or buy that? He was creating enough income from that like he wasn't making money to put in his pocket, but he was making everything he had to go play all these other games.
Yeah, yeah.
Kids were paying him to play his 1 or 2 games he
Yeah,
developed.
yeah, yeah.
And he'd keep adding to them and doing other stuff for him. But it allowed him to be able to just like keep generating money to do that. So like I never had to give him. He would end up, for a birthday present or Christmas presents, he ended up with like $200 in gift cards from everybody. But he literally never used them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So he was like selling them or trading them with his buddies for like other stuff that he was actually going to use because he was generating his own income.
No, I
doing
swear,
it.
and it's like people scorn video games and stuff like that so much, but there's actually good stuff like that like you could that's a metaphor for life or metaphor for business, right? Like in terms of like the way you operate, the way you think, like if you create that and sort of guide that and be like, okay, like meet the kids where they are, like they're gonna be on the screen, they're gonna be on the game, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Can you slowly introduce some stuff that like could build those like habits of like buying and selling and managing and caring about their if they're up or down or left or right, like I think that's a big thing too. And I mean that's similar to like how I do my thing. Like I'm meeting people where they are in terms of like not trying to be some like boring thing. I'm trying to like do this, like have a conversation, and that's essentially the gist of all of my videos. But meet them where they are, go to the platforms where they are. The attention's there. Okay, cool. Like how do I create content that's educational but like is endemic to the platform? So I think you have to gamify things to teach kids things.
Sure.
They're not going to listen otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And then you got to give them those tools as they get older too. Like I'm even thinking about like credit cards and debit cards and like because cash is almost gone away on most things, right? So you have to teach them how to like that's a real thing. But when you tap, it has a consequence. It's a balance. It's a, so it's a tricky, it's a tricky thing to teach them. But I think having the conversations is a big part of it.
Yeah. You want to be really diligent, obviously, with credit and try to get them involved as early as possible to start building credit and start using credit cards, because I think there's a stigma around credit cards. Like, okay, avoid them. Like, no, you should not avoid them. You should start building credit. And credit cards are fantastic if you have good habits around them, right? Like, I think the conventional wisdom or the dad wisdom is like only use credit cards in emergencies. And I don't necessarily think that's the case that you should be. I think you should, when you first start using it, slowly, right? Like a couple purchases here and there, but you want to eventually, the most optimized way is to do pretty much all of your spending through your credit card, as assuming it's all managed and it's your credit limit's high and your utilization's low, because you're getting fraud protection on that, you're getting insurance on that, you're getting points and perks on that. Like it's a much more efficient way to spend money, assuming you're paying your credit card bill in full on time every single month, right? So I think if you can teach an 18-year-old to like use a credit card really efficiently, like it's a really powerful way to enable their spending. The issue comes when you max out the credit card or there's bad habits and things like that.
When they think it's their cash.
It's there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, you gotta like, okay, it like you own those purchases, but you don't own that money, if that makes sense. Right. So you're going to have to pay that back. So it is your money, but it like you have to treat it as such, right? You can't just pretend like it's you have $25,000 on a credit card. Like,
for sure,
that's not your $25,000, right? So
the best thing they can do is continue to use it within their budget, for sure.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I tell people to pay it off weekly. Like if they want their credit rating to rise as quick as possible, use it as much as possible.
Yeah,
pay it off every week though.
Yeah,
but stay within your budget. Don't max your credit card just to try and like increase your credit rating and then, oh fuck, I can't pay it at the end of the month. You know what
exactly.
I mean? Pay it weekly so that you're still on your budget.
Totally.
Yeah.
Weekly by 2 times a month, or even the statement date. Like you can do that. Like you can set up automatic payments for your credit card that like it'll just pull from your checking account. You don't even have to everything's automated for me. I'm a big automation guy with finance. So like it just pulls the things, payment, thank you for the whatever. And I don't have to, remember to pay. It's just getting done. The only thing I need to make sure is I have enough cash to float in my checking account, which, for some folks, you have to actually, be very mindful of that. It's me too. Like totally. Like, is there enough money that's being pulled from whatever? And I think it's a good system to keep in mind. But in general, like, yeah, credit gets a bad rep, but it's because if you're not taught how to use it, then like, you know,
A lot of people are in the wrong mindset, right? Like they'll have a $1,500 credit card bill, and sure, like their credit limit is 10 grand, and they've got $2,000 sitting in their personal checking account. But at the end of the month, their mindset isn't, hey, like I should pay off that credit card, and I've still got $500 left. It's like, well, no, I'll pay my minimum payment of $30,
which is insane.
And I've still got $2,000 in my bank account. And it's like, that is absolutely the wrong path to go down. Like, look at this as the proper path and the long-term goal here.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I've got $2,000 in my bank account. I'm just going to pay $30 to keep my $2,000.
No. It's exactly. And I learned when I was like, 21, or I was a few years in the, like, I was like, oh, like you can have a credit card and you don't have to pay interest. Like, yeah. Like you can have a credit card and never pay interest a day in your life, because if you just pay them back on time, it costs you no money. They make money on a bunch of different ways, but like the people not paying back, that's when the interest comes in and things like that.
But I think there's a lot of people that are listening to this, and it would be the majority of people where there are balances on those credit cards. And wealth management is not for the wealthy. That's a big misconception. Like, you should be managing your finances whether you have $1 to your name or $1 million to your name. And when the debt starts to accumulate, when you do have the maxed out credit cards, because we've all had these conversations with our peers, what you have to do is you got to figure out, what are you spending, what are you making, reduce what you're spending, increase what you're making. It's that simple. It's hard, it's not easy, but it is simple. So do that worksheet. If you're listening right now, line up everything you pay out every month, every single expense you have. Put that piece of paper aside. Get a second piece of paper and list all the income that you have. That is the start of a financial plan.
It has to be. I always do that. Like, I'm a big write. Like, don't type it. Like, write physically, pen and paper. Just feels different, and feel like at a more emotional level of like everything that you're listing out.
Yep. And then you know what your ins and your outs are every month. For most of the people, it is fairly simple. You have to reduce what that outgoing is, and you have to increase what that incoming is. There are ways to increase that income. I've never met somebody that I couldn't suggest a way to make more money. You've said a bunch of them on the show. It's the hustlers. It's the, like, listen, he's got a 13-year-old playing Roblox and making some Robux.
Yeah.
There's a way to do that in the real world and turn that into real money,
Totally.
right? There are ways to do it. So you have to do that, and then make a plan. Make a plan to get your income up and your expenses down. And you might say this is controversial, but if I'm looking at anybody with a credit card balance that is accumulated and carries, that's 18%. Scary,
19,
it's 20,
24
on some products. There is no investment vehicle that I know of that's reliable.
No, I'd agree with that.
That is going to exceed 20% interest.
Forever.
Yeah. So
there is no investment. There is
now,
no investment.
all you have to do, get the income up, pay the debt down, get the credit cards to zero, and then roll into investing. I know people that are taking, $200, $300 a month, and they're putting that into, let's say it's a stock account. They're using Wealthsimple. Let's use that as an example. And they're buying stocks and they're trading stocks and they're whatever. They could be taking that same money and saving themselves 20% interest over on the debit. So stop fucking around with the investing and the risky stuff. Go put that in and deal with the debt. And once the debt is dealt with, then get 100%. Into
the high interest debt. Like, there's absolutely no reason why. I mean, and it's funny because it's enabled by, some of these stories, these startup stories on like how I built this. Like, I maxed out all my credit cards and put it in my business and blah, blah, blah. Like, just because it worked out for them, there's a huge survivorship bias. That's not a smart financial decision.
And that's one person, and that's one guy.
Exactly.
For every one of those, there's 1,000 that didn't work.
Exactly. And now are just like had to declare bankruptcy. So it's like, okay, that story aside or whatever, like, there will never be a reason why you should keep that debt. Like, that should be your only focus. Now, if it's like your mortgage or student loans and the interest is much, much lower, that becomes a more nuanced conversation of like, how much do you invest, how much you paid on your debt, whatever. Credit cards, get rid of them. Like, get rid of that debt and use it responsibly. And if you're not that person that knows how to use it responsibly, then pay it down and like take a break or whatever it is, and come back to it when you've built that financial sort of muscle,
And a lot of people when they're sitting down with somebody, it's like, okay, let's create our budget. Let's figure out what our budget is. And on their budget, they're like, okay, well, whether they make 25,000 or they make 100,000 or they make 500,000. If the decision is like, hey, like I've got to save $5,000 a year, it is way easier to make $5,000 more a year than it is to save $5,000. But the majority of people are in the other mindset where they're like, okay, what should we scale back and what do we have to get rid of to try and save that $5,000? You don't need to do that. For sure, there are things that, everybody has way too many subscriptions these days and whatever.
You only reduce to a point.
But still, if they just stayed where they're at spending, it is way easier and way less effort to make $5,000 more a year, no matter what you make, than it is to save $5,000 a year.
Yeah. You have to
and
drastically.
most people don't get that.
Exactly.
Like they don't push themselves into that mind space. And it's like, just go do anything. You could do anything and make $5,000 a year, but it is really hard to scale back a lifestyle to save $5,000.
Yeah, totally.
No matter how much you make.
No, totally. Like taking what would that be? Like 400 something bucks a month you have to find.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of,
Like,
that's
what
a
do you
huge
not
change.
do? Do you not go for dinner once a week then with your family? Like there's no reason to live an unhappy life to save $5,000 a year.
Yeah.
Go bust your ass and make five. And that's not even a hard number to go make.
No.
If you have to make $5,000 a year is not hard.
No. Totally not.
It's not going to your boss and asking for a raise, which by all means, like you do a ton of podcasts or you do a ton of shorts and clips on that stuff. But that's not the only path.
No, not at all.
There are a ton of ways to go do what you're saying. Like hop on Facebook Marketplace, go buy some shit for $50 and go sell it for 110. Like there's a ton of ways to do that stuff.
Yeah.
But most people can't get in that mindset. It's like you need a kick in the ass to just change the public's mindset of saving money, because you don't need to save money in your budget. You need to go bust your ass and go make some more money.
Some more. The key is you just got to not spend more, right?
For sure.
Yeah, just keep that level at least, right?
Yeah, and right now too, I mean, you look at emerging AI technologies, you look at some of the, you say the internet's a wonderful thing, some of the ways you can make money. First off, we live in a time where there is no limit to our access to knowledge. If you want to learn how to do something, you can probably go learn for free right now on your cell phone. Like in my early days, my hustle at the time was I was building websites. I taught myself WordPress as WordPress was, kind of gaining popularity. And I was just going to companies and I was saying, what do you use for the CMS and the back end of your website? Oh, you don't have one?
Yeah.
Oh, you pay your internet guy X amount of dollars an hour to do it every time you want to do an update. Let me tell you about this. I'm going to build you a new WordPress website. We're going to do this. I'm going to show you how to use it yourself so you can do your own updates, or you can pay me to do your updates. I did that with zero knowledge and instantly. Like I was online within a couple of days, built my own website and whatever. That was free and it was doable from the comfort of my own home. I didn't have to know anybody. But then this led to that. And I did it while I was working full time. So there are always ways to hustle and make more. I just think that the mentality isn't there that I could make more, or the mentality is I already work full time.
Yeah.
I don't have time for like that mindset is a massive barrier to the next level, to success.
Yeah. I think like, there's back to that whole mental thing. Like you have to get out of that funk of like, I can't, or like these limiting beliefs that you have, right? You gotta, and I agree, like finding a way to make $5,000 more a year. Like that's some people would scoff at that. I mean, I think that's totally reasonable. Like what the hell? Like you can't find a way to make $5,000 extra a year? Like pick up shifts, go work somewhere. I don't know. Yeah. Just find the money. Like if you're motivated enough and you have enough of a reason to do that, you will go out of your way and do that. And so totally. And it can be more 10, 20, like it really can. If you go out and similar to all the different ways we've been talking about it, like if you want it, it's out there for you.
Yeah.
You know?
And let me ask you about mindset too. And let me ask you about mental health, because that's a topic that we try and weave through this program as well too. How do you find, because like what I know about you is you're a motivated guy. You keep yourself accountable. You put your fitness up real high on your priorities. What's the mindset? Just
life. Like, how do I think about like what in particular?
Yeah. Give me an example of you're feeling like shit, but you know you're supposed to be at the gym.
Everything in life is building the muscle, right? Building the muscle of this, building the muscle of that. And like discipline is a muscle. And I think over time, one thing I used to do, I don't do it anymore, but one thing I used to do in university was I would purposely make my classes like at 8 a.m. So that it would force me to go to the gym at 6. So I went to the gym, my girlfriend and I, every single morning. Like 6 a.m. we were there Monday to Friday, and Saturday we go a bit later. With fitness in particular, like I think a big thing has been, we did the class together, right?
Yeah.
I love that. Like we're starting to do like smaller classes, but like having that like really tight tribe, like it allows you to push to a level you wouldn't by yourself. And I really enjoy that. So now I'm more so just like, I don't need to sit here and have an ego about how disciplined I am. Like, oh God, I'm so disciplined. Like I get up and I do this and that, because we're humans and we're eventually going to fall off. Some fall off faster and harder than others. Some are David Goggins, right? Most of us are somewhere in the middle of that. And I think for me, I just try to make the decision as easy as possible and as frictionless as possible. So yeah. That's awesome.
You're a fun guy to work out with. I know I was the same thing. I was just trying to keep up. And fuck, I felt old. There's times where I tell myself, I'm like, I can still lift heavy. I can still run. No, this old dog was real tired.
That was good. Are you ever going to come back?
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah?
I liked it. It's for those listening, we're talking about Grit Labs, which is functional fitness. It's kind of like a CrossFit-esque kind of vibe.
Yeah. More approachable. But CrossFit,
more approachable for sure. And some great people there too.
Yeah, totally.
So it was fun. It was fun for sure. But yeah, I think it's about finding what works. But I like the putting parameters on yourself. Like, listen, we all need some accountability.
Yeah.
And for me, like, mine is using my calendar. I use my calendar like it's absolutely unbreakable. If I put it in there, I have to do it. But it's about finding what works, right? Like,
I'm the same way, but I got a physio appointment in 5 minutes that my calendar's going off in my pocket. And I'm like, I'm not going to make it because this is just too fun. And I'm going to make myself more accountable for this right now. So physio's taking a back seat. Sorry, calendar.
Yeah.
What's, so New Money is the platform. We know it today, and I encourage anybody listening to go check it out. It's great stuff. What's it look like in 3 years? What's it look like in 5 years?
Yeah, man, I'm thinking a lot about that right now. I think I'm going to start to, over time, bring in, like, it's not just going to be me talking to myself. Like, I'll bring in maybe some other people, some of the creators. We're going to collaborate on some stuff. Like, I think we have one coming up that we haven't, like, shot, but we've been talking about it a while that we're going to shoot. And then, maybe that looks like me just being behind the scenes. And then maybe I'm just like sort of coordinating these sort of stories. And then I just have like 2 actors.
You're going to have 2 or 3 different personalities doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah. And like they come and then I'm
Murphy.
just behind with Miles, just running the show type thing. And that's a much more scalable way that I could get that to go. And like, it's actually funny. I had, and I wouldn't call this like a serious conversation, but like I had a brand reach out and so let me preface this by saying I've never considered my thing that I do right now like a sellable business because it's me, like it's my brand, and you can't really detach that. Like it's Nate, like Nate Kennedy or whatever, right?
It can make you a ton of money, but still be a business that's tough to sell.
So some would say it's even like a high paying job because it's not a whatever. I would say it's a business, but like big key man risk, right?
Yeah.
But I had a brand reach out and be like, hey, like, what would it take for you to sell like all your pages and whatever? And I'm like, dude, that's not even a serious question. Like, because
then
I was like, he's like, well, what would it take? I was like, well, a lot of money, like millions of dollars, maybe. I don't know. Why would I have ever thought about that? He's like, well, I know your style. And if you were to, make some things and talk about, and he kind of brought it up a bit. And I was like, well, I guess if I were to sort of, the reason why the content works is the story and is the dialogue. And I'm not delusional enough to think it's like they love my fucking ugly mug. Like it's the content that we're writing and stories that we're telling are interesting. And it's about topics that people find interesting. I'm not like a classic, like, I don't know, like a Logan Paul or like some personality that's doing all these things and people just show up for me. They show up for the content, and I like it like that because I don't want to be involved in all of that vanity and all that stuff. Like I like that they show up for the story, right? The story, if I've gotten pretty good at that, like can live without me being the actor. If I can find somebody that can portray it as good as I can, if not better.
You just need to get that proof of concept out there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to work on over the next couple of years is figuring out like.
And that's what makes it a saleable, scaled,
and then it's a serious conversation around that, right? Because they said, well, if you were to do that, let's keep in touch, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, maybe that could be a thing.
For sure.
But I think over time, more so, I just kind of want to take it where it goes, take this where it goes. But that's sort of made itself pretty clear. And I think some other ambitions have come up as well around like, I want to get back into podcasting. I really do. And I've been kind of floating some ideas around with some different brands. So we might be collaborating on some stuff, and maybe I'll be using the studio for a couple shows and things like that.
Say less.
But I think podcasting is one of those ones where it's such a great format. Like I know Miles was telling me that he was talking to you and you were saying like, man, like that was it. That's what it is. Just a conversation. Like I could do this all day. And I think that's really dope because as much as I love what we do now, like it is very grueling in terms of getting that idea and like an idea that works, an idea that like a lot of people want to watch versus like a podcast. Like you can, if you get it to scale and you get it that loyal audience, like it is such a, you could literally do this till you die, till you're like 80. Like there's no like age, like you don't age out of podcasting. You might age out of like what I do a little bit. You might age out of like video or whatever. Maybe you're just like, man, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I want to be doing title and thumbnail on YouTube, whatever, when I'm 40 or whatever, even though you can, and that's fantastic. But like podcasting is very well accepted from like a very timeless thing. Right. So I'm like, man, I would love to get something like that going. And then I don't know. Other than that, we'll see. I guess that's kind of where we're at.
When do you see kids in the future?
A couple of years, man.
Yeah,
a couple of years, maybe 5-ish years, 6 years.
And that's when the business vision will change.
Yeah, probably 100%. That'll all change. I think definitely early on, I think like info products was like one of those ones where that's like the first thing that like people go to. But, you know, like your ebooks, your courses, your, you know, all that kind of like secondary stuff in terms of like running a business. And people have done very well doing that. But I think early on, I was kind of like, I want to focus on the content. And looking back, like I'm kind of glad I did because I've built my brand quite large. And I've seen people who maybe swung the other way where they were kind of like, hey, let me make some money and like sort of like gold rush. Like this is not going to be here tomorrow. And their brands kind of died off. And like they really didn't make that much money when I look back at it. So it's like, I'm glad I just put everything into the content and the brand. And it's a risk, right? Like, sure. Yeah. But I think I'm glad I made those decisions because now, like, I have a brand, I have contacts, I have like ways that I can sort of make money in a bunch of different unique sort of ways because of my personal brand and my platform now. So that's kind of like, I'm just looking to like compound that over the next few years.
Well, the cool thing is like, even though right now it's built around you as the personality, you're right. It's all about that content. So if you find the right one or two other people to be that different personality,
totally, then
you've got something that it can explode and you can be reaching a ton of other people too. Absolutely. Right? Because your personality, as great as it is, and as much as we love you, it's not everybody's personality.
No, totally.
So if you're able to grow that and pull in another personality or two, but still have you writing all that content and getting that same information out there,
yeah,
it's crazy.
Well, that's the model. That's the model that has worked for a lot of those companies that have scaled. Is they've brought in those different people. Like you know, I mean, the best. And then you know, think of them as you want to, but like Barstool, for example, is like it was Dave Portnoy, and then he brought in like all these amazing, wonderful people that eventually went off to do their own thing. But like the current roster of folks that they have there is like it's insane. Like they just their eye for talent, whatever. And Dave is still a big part of it, but like there's so many different people that he's brought in and it's created like this empire, right?
For sure.
That's one of the only ones that's sort of stuck around as opposed to like maybe like BuzzFeed and some of the other ones that fizzled off is because they didn't treat their talent and invest in their talent the same way that Dave does, and enable them to go on and do their own thing. Like obviously Alex Cooper is like, if not, he might be bigger than Dave, right? Yeah. But she was Barstool through and through, like started and like really grassroots stuff, right? So I don't know. I'm not trying to say I'm going to start the friggin' next Barstool or whatever, but like some small version of like talent incubation, like bringing in creators, like whatever, where I know a good format and how to make content. Like how do we scale that? How do we get that going? And it would always probably live in the money, business, finance space because I just like love that stuff.
Yeah, you're looking for a different client. He's not looking for clients that are looking to be truly inspired and you know make a change.
Yeah, exactly.
He's looking for the quick viral.
Yeah, exactly.
And that financial literacy piece is so in demand. Like
for sure,
our schools aren't teaching it, man.
Yeah, totally.
So like, who does?
Exactly.
Guys like you, right? And we're hoping that this is an ongoing thing because like I hear that call to duty because I just think to myself like, you have all of these kids that are growing up right now, right here, and not being taught what, in my opinion, is kind of the, you know, the foundation of happiness is you have to have some financial stability.
Yeah,
you just do.
Yeah.
And we're not teaching it.
No.
So.
And it doesn't have to come from us old guys all the time.
Right. I know.
From a young guy that's just crushing it.
There you go. There you go.
Young cool guys in here. So last question,
Please.
and then we're gonna have some fun.
Okay, cool.
And just tell our listeners, man, where are you from? What was family like growing up?
Yeah, so I was born in Toronto, and we lived in Mississauga for a bit. Went to Calgary. That's where my brother and sister were born. And then we came back to Mississauga until I was like 10. Then I lived in Grimsby until like I went to school. I went to Western, and then graduated. Lived in Ancaster for a bit actually. Just found a spot out there just because it was right around when I wanted to. I was working, and it was right around when I wanted to go all in on this. So I don't know. It was just a nice, quiet, quaint town, good part of Hamilton. So I was like, okay, just gonna go there, live there for a few years, and then just moved to Burlington this year. And so I've kind of bounced around a little bit, but certainly not like crazy, like I wasn't on a plane until I was like, I don't know, like 21 or 22 or something like that. I didn't travel much. We didn't go on vacation. We just would go, road trips and things like that. But yeah, it's super humble family, super humble beginnings. Had a great upbringing, honestly. We just were very humble. Like we didn't have much. And it was part of the motivation for me to get involved with money and finances and all that kind of stuff was we just did not have any of it. So you just realize pretty quick, like, oh, okay, there's the haves and the have-nots. So I always kind of knew that, but then it wasn't until university that I started to like teach myself like actual financial literacy topics and, sort of thoughts around what to do with the money and how to like manage it effectively. And how to like, pay off my credit card that was maxed out back then. How to, what are my plans for student debt afterward? Like, how does that all work and stuff like that? I took that super seriously in university and just taught myself a lot of it. And, that's what was sort of the impetus for me to make all the content pod and everything.
And then family dynamic growing up, mom, dad,
yeah, mom, dad, both
Yeah.
in the picture. Yeah. It was a great family. I think my mom is probably my biggest, not my dad so totally supports me, but, my mom was my biggest like cheerleader. And like, I think when I think about like my belief in myself and like, just my sort of like, I guess, confidence. I think I got it from her just because she was so encouraging growing up. And you just kind of really made you believe, like maybe delusionally, like you could take over the world type thing. Like you could really do whatever you want. And I empathize with folks that didn't have that, like, and I'm so grateful for that. And as I age, I'm more and more grateful for that because I find it really does help when you have that support early on, similar to what we were talking about early on. But my dad was a super big influence in terms of just, he was like the most stoic guy. Like my dad's like, it's funny. So my dad is like this white newfie guy, like from, out east. And then my mom is like East African, like very traditional Somali, right? So it's a very, very different two types of parents. But my dad was very much like very stoic, very like calm, just like taught me so much about like just, there's just a shit storm going on outside. You just have to be like really dialed, like get up every single day and work and go and show up. And no matter what, like that's what you got to do.
Brush off the noise.
Yeah,
and just keep
exactly.
going.
And like, he's a real East Coaster like that. So yeah, that's my family dynamic and brother and sister and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And what's, so love East Coasters. Your dad drop any wisdom on you? Anything he taught you that always sticks with you?
I think my dad's one of those ones where, he like my brother and I joke about it all the time that like he pontificates a lot. Like he'll kind of just be like, oh, well, then just kind of talk. And I'm like, okay, well, how much how much is the surface level? How much do you actually know? But, he one thing he does know a lot about is like my dad's a butcher. So, quite a manly guy in that sense. And so just different cuts of steak and different cuts of meat and like how to prepare it and how to do everything. And so actually a lot of cooking stuff.
You get nervous when your dad comes over and you barbecuing?
No.
Fuck it up.
Yeah, don't fuck it up. He's pretty good like that actually. He's not like that. He wouldn't get on me. But like I would say, yeah, he's got a wealth of knowledge in that. Obviously it's his job. So that's like a very dad like thing he taught me early on. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What does your mom do?
Store manager. She works in grocery, so she's just runs I think it's like a Costco or something like that in Windsor.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah. Exactly, man. Exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. In my mind, I'm picturing just like you're a tall guy, like He's a 6'5" butcher from.
No, he's shorter than I am. He's shorter than I am. He's stocky guy. Stocky.
Okay.
He's like the stocky, like newfie kind of guy. Yeah.
How's the handshake?
Firm.
Yeah.
Firm. Very firm.
Real firm.
And you can't understand what the hell he's saying if he starts talking to his relatives. Like I literally like could not, like the way he speaks. It's like, I don't know. Have you ever heard a newfie go on and on
It's
and on?
its own language.
Oh my God, dude. It's amazing. So I don't have a very good imitation. My brother does though. He's really good at imitating my dad. So yeah.
What did you
on the mental health side? So you're a very happy guy. You
Thank
walk
you,
in, you have an energy about you. How do you get your mind there? Does it come natural to you? Anything you want to say on mental health?
Man, you know what? I do think in some ways it comes natural, but I think there's certainly been periods where I do think that, like, not to get too deep, but like I do think that
get deep, man?
Get deep.
Get deep.
I think this is a hypothesis. I think everybody, if you're alive long enough, will be depressed at some point, or you will have a depressed state, or you have a state where you just really go through some shit and you're like off. And how dark and how deep it gets varies. Some people are lucky where it doesn't get too deep. They're just kind of in a funk. Some people, like, it gets all the way, right? I think, but you're going to go through that and you're going to have those stretches of your life. And I feel like I've had those stretches. I think there's two key stretches where I was like, man, like I don't feel like myself. Like there was one where it was like 2021. It wasn't that I didn't feel like myself. It was like I felt nothing. And I don't know why. Like I just was very numb and very like just no joy, no motivation. And I think when I know I'm off is like when, and not to make it too businessy, hustle, whatever, but like my motivation for the future and my motivation of what I want to do like dwindles and I'm not thinking about that anymore. I think that's when I know, okay, I'm off, because if I'm not excited about tomorrow, then like I'm off. Right. So I think going through that was really formative, because it's like how I got out of that, obviously talking to someone, obviously talking to my family, being very open about it, and just knowing that like things get better over time, like, and just having that belief, knock on wood. For some they do, for some they don't, but like you have to have that belief. It's just like, why wake up and do anything if you don't have the belief that like, tomorrow's going to be better, right? And I think, and over time it did. And I think for me, just going through that, and then a little bit like 2 years ago, something like that sort of happened where I was kind of just like, okay, like things are good, whatever, but like I just feel weird. I feel off. I don't know what it is. And I can't even tell you why these things happen. There wasn't like a specific event. It just kind of comes over you and you're just in it. But I think like the reason why I don't know, I guess come off as happy, or maybe is because I am, right? I really, really am. And I think I wake up every day, I'm super grateful that like, one, like I have everything and my family and everything like that, but more so like, dude, I'm excited. Like I'm excited about today. I'm excited about tomorrow. Like how great is this? Like I'm excited that I'm excited. You know what I mean? Like I know what it's like to not be excited and like motivated. And like I'll do have these stretches where like it's not something that's like super conscious, where I'm like, oh, like, because some people are like, they'll sit down and be like, what am I grateful for today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. For me, it's more so just like probably daily. I have a moment like, fuck, man, pinch me. Like this is sick. Like I even like
it's powerful. Man.
It's like, you know what I mean? Like it's like
powerful.
even you know, and shout out to you, Chris. Like you letting us use your studio. Like the amount of times Miles and I've been like, dude, this is so fucking sick. Like how do we pay this guy back? Like I tell you all the time, like, you know, and if it's busting your ass about getting this podcast up and running, then like there it is, right? But like, you know, I think if you have that, and it just gives you a different energy, right? Where you're just like, man, like I'm just so like, this is so sick, you know, this is so dope. Like, and I know what it's like, I've gone through shit like everybody has, where it's not like that. So I just feel like I have a pretty good gauge of when things were really shitty, and like a gauge when they're really good. And like things are usually really good if you're doing the right things and you're prioritizing the right things. And so I never let that go to the wayside. And when I do let that go to the wayside a bit, like I try to bring it back and be like, dude, like you need to understand, like while keeping your ego in check, like life is sick. Life is dope. Like it's awesome. There's a lot of bad, fucking terrible things that are happening, but like, I don't know, life's pretty good, man. So like, why not like be happy and enjoy it, you know?
But when you were in those two mindsets, like when that happened 2 years ago and 4 or 5 years ago, who was the person that helped pulled you out of that the most? Like who was your go-to, and what did they do?
Yeah, I think certainly my girlfriend 2 years ago, and then 5 or 6 years ago, I think it was. I don't know how long ago. Maybe it was more than that. You know what? It was my family. Like, it was my brother, actually. It was my brother. Yeah, my younger brother. He's 2 years younger. Like, it was definitely him, where he was kind of just like, just told him like all of that kind of stuff, and just, it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a key thing. It was like, dude, I just don't feel anything. I'm numb. Like, I don't know what it is. And like, he's like, yeah, man. Like, and just super like open with him, and that just helped. He just was there for me. I don't know. And like, I just was out of it. And I was like, okay, well, that was weird. And like, here we are. But like, and maybe it'll happen in the future. And that's when you lean on those people. But I think I certainly like really encourage people to like talk to somebody, whether it's like a counselor or like a professional, a mental health professional. Like, that really helped a ton too, especially 2 years ago. Like, I definitely did. And like, I think even if you're in a good place, checking in with somebody just from a mindset perspective, just like, maybe it's monthly or every other month, where you're just like, hey, like, this is what's going on right now. Things are great, love life, whatever. But like, just have a check-in. Yeah. Do you feel like you're good? Because we spend so much time like working on our body and working on our businesses and working on our life, but like, you got to work on your mind too. And so I obviously, like, athletes have those like mental health, like, people, or like those like performance coaches, they call them, right? Really, it's a therapist. And like, you could get, with things like BetterHelp or whatever, you could get a therapist for pretty, it's pretty cheap, right? So, or with your insurance or whatever. So, but it's just like so important, right? Like, why wouldn't you spend money on your mind and your mental clarity like you spend money on getting protein at Herc's?
For sure.
Or like your gym membership or whatever, right?
Your
like,
mind is a muscle.
It is.
Yeah.
And like, you need that outside perspective, because it'll, like, there's been so many epiphanies that I've had just chatting with somebody, being like, man, like, I didn't, like, most of therapy is, like, they'll ask you a question and you answer it, and then you answer your own question that you bring up, and then they're just guiding you in basically like a schizophrenic sort of way, where you're just talking to yourself, really, but they're guiding you and they're helping you do that. And so that obviously like helps a ton. So I'll try to do that from time to time, like, just check in with somebody and just be like, try to see like where my head's at, how am I thinking about things, like, and honestly, it's a great preventative thing, where like, am I slipping down a way or a line of thinking that's going to make me more maybe depressed over time or something like that? Or like, is my, self-talk becoming, is that sliding? Is that becoming more negative? Like, why aren't you this? Why aren't you that? Whatever. Like, having that outside perspective to ask you those questions, like, can keep you in line and bring you back in, just like a gym trainer, right? I know I keep coming to that, but that's just like the most salient example that like people can think, like if you have a trainer at the gym, like, they'll bring you back into shape, they'll bring you in line, they'll keep you accountable, right? It's the same thing with that. So that was a huge part. Like, all of that was like a huge part in like getting through all of it.
A lot of people see that as a bad thing, right? Like, they don't realize that going to therapy or talking to a therapist is a good thing. They like, I don't want to be that person. I'm I don't want to think that I have a problem. But it makes a huge difference.
Totally.
Like, going to talk to somebody, whether it's a therapist or a friend or a family member, like, it does make a huge difference.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You're gonna have, like, I bank on it. I don't know. I'd have to interview 8 billion people, but I'm pretty sure if you're on the earth long enough, you will be depressed at some point. You will need to go talk to somebody, or you would be served well to go talk to somebody. But I am of the mind that like, everybody should always be talking to somebody, because it's just there's such an advantage to it.
It's another day. Hello, everyone.
Yes.
But to the listeners, we're going to make it look kind of seamless. So we're going to pick up where we left off. So last time we were talking, we had a couple of questions that we try and ask all of our guests. You want to go into those?
Yes, please.
All right. So first question, and this is going back to when we were talking about some of those paternal or male figures that you've had in your life that have got you to where you are today. And our question is, what is the best advice given to you by a dad or somebody in a fatherly role?
The one thing my dad really drilled in me, he would always say, like, no matter how much you drink, no matter how much you whatever, no matter what you do, like the day before, you go to bed as a man, you wake up as a man. You don't go to bed as a man and wake up as a boy. And just, those days where you just don't want to do it. And like, he's just like, no matter what, you're not calling in sick. You're not doing this. I don't care if you're like crawling into work or whatever. Like, you're going to fucking show up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like, that's what it is. And it's like, my dad doesn't have many, sayings and things like that, but he lived that. Like, whatever it was, whatever issues or whatever thing had, like he would show up early all the time. But it is a principle that I try my best to abide by, and I think that that's the most profound thing my dad left with me, and I try to carry in my life. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a huge one, though. I mean,
Yeah.
that, you talk about that energy and showing up and whatever. That's man, that'll get you so far.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
show up on time and be awesome and watch what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
it's
start
It's
there,
so simple,
right?
but it's so like rare. Honestly.
Well, and everybody
Yeah.
can look at their friend group and go, there's these two guys that I know if we get to drinking tonight, those guys aren't going to work tomorrow.
Yeah,
But, like,
exactly.
I'm going to the gym tomorrow. I'm going to work after, and I'm going
Yeah.
to hammer out the day. Right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next question, man. This is a surprise segment we
Okay.
call Dream Car Garage, and I
Okay.
actually know you got a new whip outside, so this is relevant.
Yeah.
So the rules of this are simple. You got all the money in the world, but you need to own 3 vehicles. Okay.
Mhm.
So I'm going to ask you, what would your daily be? What
Mhm.
would your winter beater be? And what's the flex? What are those 3
Oh
cars?
man. I think my daily would be like a Model S Plaid. I like I really enjoy like my Tesla, and I think that would be great. I think I'm a little ways away from something like that in terms of responsibly having that as a daily, but I think not too far. So like that's what the daily would be. So daily, flex, and then what was the other one?
Winter.
Winter.
What's your winter beater?
Do you still stick with Tesla?
No,
Range
no,
issues, bro.
no. Cybertruck. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey.
No. I wouldn't. That thing is god awful looking. I really,
Amen to that.
I really don't. I think it's hideous. Like, and I literally like, I think it's disgusting. So, I actually wouldn't mind like a winter, like those Raptors, like those massive trucks,
Like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
pickup truck?
like blacked out, murdered, would just look fucking crazy. Like, I would
Yeah.
love something like that.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no reason for me I don't lug wood. I don't have like a practical fucking use for a truck other than
Your
a
gym bag.
small dick or some shit like that. Yeah. But no, I think if I had all the money in the world, I'd probably have a massive black truck, and then a flex would be. You guys see the new Ferrari trucks?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
Those are
Pure
Pure
Sangue or something like that.
Probably
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, they're pretty sick.
Yeah. Because maybe there's a little bit of practicality. I don't know. There's something about just like a regular Lambo or Ferrari that just feels like so not stupid, but it's just like I drive this for like a quarter mile or some shit like that, and then I like, what am I gonna do with this? It's like this far off the ground. I'm so scared that somebody's gonna scratch it or do anything to it. So honestly, a Ferrari Pure Sangue would be probably the flex, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good lineup.
Yeah.
And then just going back to you had some very distinguished comments on a particular vehicle. Jamie, do you want to share with the listeners what you've been waiting for 2 years?
Yeah, I just got my VIN number for my Cybertruck
Oh
that I've
my
had on order
God,
for
dude.
5 years. I've had it on order, and I ordered it because it is the most ugly fucking truck, and everybody hates it. And on our dad group, you wouldn't believe how many daily posts there are about people hating this fucking truck.
So I want to do a couple things before we go. So just tell me about how we follow you and
New Money Nate on TikTok, Nate New Money on everything else. Any financial questions, anything like that, you can hit me on anything, Instagram, LinkedIn. I pretty much respond to everybody. Hit me up. I'm happy to help in any way I can. That's pretty much it. That's all I got in terms of plugs.
Yeah. Nate's DM's very busy place, but he takes the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I want you to close out the show. So the way we close out the show is we're going to ask you, what's your favorite dad joke?
So there's a husband and a wife, and they're watching TV together, and they're flipping through, and they stop on the fishing channel and they watch the fishing channel for a bit, and then they keep flipping, and then they happen to have a porn channel, and there's just like some pornography going on, whatever.
What channel was it?
The dad or whatever, or the husband, quickly like kind of panics and then goes back to the fishing channel and watches fishing, and then the wife goes, no, go back. You already know how to fish.
But
That's the joke.
And on that note, thank you again, Nate.
Thank you guys.
Take care,
Appreciate
bro.
it.
Thanks, buddy.
Cheers.
Bye bye.